Are you ready? Okay, Miranda, will you call to order, please?
Yes, we are calling the planning commission meeting to order at 7:05 on January 25th. Chair Williams,
Here.
Vice Chair Reese,
Present.
Commissioner Cornell. Here. Commissioner Duggan,
Yep. Here.
Commissioner Dye,
Present.
Commissioner Glasser,
Yes.
Commissioner Rivera.
Here.
I don't see Commissioner Herring online. I think you're starting without Commissioner Herring at this time.
That's fine. We'll sign her in when she shows up. Okay, so, first order of business tonight is the approval of the minutes from the November 30th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting. They won't have a chance to review them. If you have any comments, please pass them on to Miranda at this point. Anybody? No? That's good. Short and sweet.
I make a motion that we accept the minutes from December.
Okay, do we have a second?
A second?
Okay,
Commissioner Rivera,
Yes.
Commissioner Glasser.
I'm not sure that I was at that meeting.
I think you were, I feel like the only person missing was Commissioner Cornell.
It was one.
It was November though, it was like forever.
yeah.
Yes.
My
Yes.
mistake, November,
Yeah,
yes.
it feels like years ago. Commissioner Dye,
Yes.
Commissioner Duggan,
Approved.
Commissioner Cornell,
Abstain.
Vice Chair Reese,
Yes.
Chair Williams.
Yes. And so maybe one suggestion, Miranda, in the future is just put who was absent on the minutes. That way, if our memories give out on us,
Fair.
we'll have a cheat sheet.
That's fair. That's
Okay.
fair.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, do we have anyone in the public who wishes to speak on any agenda or any item that is not on tonight's agenda? You have 3 minutes, and please come up to the podium and name and address, please.
Yes, Susan Wagner, 12300 Magnolia Drive. I submitted,
Is your microphone on?
let me check.
I don't think it's,
It is on, oh, yeah.
Speak right into the mic.
Push button. Is it green? Okay.
this is for a non-agenda item.
This is a non-agenda.
Okay,
Um, Well, it was listed on the agenda as a non-agenda, item, so I assumed you considered it. I wrote to say,
Would you move within an inch of the mic? I can't.
oh, okay, is that it?
I don't think it's on.
Oh, wait, no, you're right.
so before you start, let me just make a comment that Ron is sitting over by the speakers because he needs to be able to hear
Yeah.
through the speakers, so
Okay,
normally he would sit out there.
I see.
Okay, thank you.
So Susan Wagner, 12300 Magnolia Drive. My family lives on a 10-acre mining claim that abuts the southern border of Nederland. We purchased it in 1988, and we were initially included in the primary planning area. So it just introduced, I have one main question, but to let you know, I really would like to see a new IGA with the county, and I'm happy with the annexation ordinance. I'm happy with the fact that they removed the boat, which had been in the municipal code and also in the IGA that just expired. But the one thing I want to introduce here, since you are the planning commission, is, the language, the other language I found very odd, and I'd like to hear if you find it odd, if this is typical language, that they introduced the line through this ordinance saying that if you, the planning commission, do not submit a recommendation on an annexation application within 7 days, that will be considered unconditional approval of annexation application. So I'm concerned that the general trend here is for increased annexation for development. So that's my.
Okay, thank you. I think we're going to have a town hall on annexation coming up in the near future. So any other comments you might have, please submit those. That would be great. Okay, thank you, Susan. Anyone else have any items to bring up that's not on tonight's agenda? Is this on, by the way?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Can't hear myself, yes. Okay, I'll close that portion of tonight's agenda, and we'll move on to the action items. And the first item up on the agenda is a rezone application for 101st Street for Nederland Central Business District Redevelopment LLC. And before we start, I will ask each of the planning commission members if anyone has any conflict of interest or financial gain from this to recuse themselves. Not, does anyone has made any ex parte or any other communication or contact regarding this issue with the applicant? Okay, if not, we'll go ahead and continue. Public hearing is now open for considering this application, and I'll ask Miranda to please present the introduction to this application.
Timmy, will you mute yourself? Because now we're gonna get an echo on his computer, because you joined on your computer now.
Yeah, it should be muted.
Okay, we're good now.
Sorry about it.
Are you ready for me?
I am ready.
Okay, so tonight before you is a consideration of a rezone application for 101st Street. Oftentimes this lot has been referred to as 100 East First Street, but the official property is 101st Street. The applicant, which is Nederland Central Business District Redevelopment LLC, is represented by Ronald Mitchell. And he is seeking a rezone for a variety of reasons, which he outlined in his narrative, and I'll go into in a second. But 101st Street is currently high-density residential, where primarily you can have residential uses and a park, and you've got minimum lot sizes of 4,000 square feet, minimum lot coverage of 40%, and the front setbacks of 20 feet. He's looking to have it rezoned to Central Business District. The lots currently to the west are Central Business District, as well as across the street to the north. Under Central Business District, residential alone is not allowed. But what is allowed is commercial, mixed use could be considered, parks, marijuana, as well as some industrial uses under a special review use. In the Central Business District, someone can currently develop their entire lot. So there's full lot coverage, and there are no setbacks or minimum lot sizes. I just think it's important for you to have that context going into this. Currently, the parcel is a parking lot. There are 20 spaces, which is allowed under code. Anything more than 20 spaces would require a special review use. Previously, the applicant had grown hops there, and the parcel does abut to the river, and it's undeveloped in that area. And if you noted on the site plan, it does kind of sit between two floodplains on the north and the south. The applicant is looking to rezone for three very specific reasons. First, he'd like to continue to use this as a parking lot, but he would like to increase the number of spaces to be more than 20. And if approved, he is seeking to turn this lot into paid parking as a part of his larger paid parking proposal. He'd also be interested in kind of creating a mini park on the south side with picnic tables and chairs. And he recommended the creation of a retention pond for stormwater runoff, and it offered town an easement. And I'll get to that in a little bit. When doing the analysis, I think it's first important to note that rezoning is really discouraged, and it's only considered under those three categories, which I listed in the aim. So first, the land to be rezoned was zoned in error, and as presently zoned is inconsistent with the policies and goals of the comprehensive plan. The applicant did note that it has some kind of commercial uses in the past. However, we could not identify that in any of our property records. So the applicant will have to speak to that more. We did note though, kind of throughout the aim here, that there is, again, we can't say for certain if it was zoned in error, but there are some ties to the comprehensive plan. Number two, the evaluating criteria is the area for which zoning is requested has changed or is changing to such a degree that is in the public interest to encourage a redevelopment of this area. What we as staff kind of did is we took the application at how it was submitted with these three areas of what the applicant is planning to do. We have identified that Parking is of course a need. The planning commission did put together a subcommittee to focus on parking and did note that parking was a need and public-private partnerships were the way to resolve that. We also did note that the comprehensive plan, the Trails Master Plan, do talk about the value of having parks and parks in the central business district. And the comprehensive plan speaks in length about drainage and the need to address drainage in the central business district. I do want to note, though, the comprehensive plan places just as much value on housing. You know, we do acknowledge that this is currently a high-density residential zone, and it was zoned, you know, the applicant did initially propose housing here at one point in time, workforce housing. And so our evaluation is focused kind of purely on what the applicant is claiming to want to do here. We had noted that, you know, when asking the applicant really why is he no longer interested in housing, he had explained that the businesses had expressed that they would prefer parking here and that he really is feeling like there's a better need for this lot to be a parking lot and to address the drainage that is currently coming off of First Street. We do have in detail kind of our engineer's analysis of the drainage. We also have Mark Hall, our streets manager, online with us to answer any questions about it is a town problem and about kind of some of the ways in which maybe we could consider addressing it, but at this time we are not interested in the easement, but do understand that the drainage is an issue. The third evaluating criteria is the proposed rezoning is necessary in order to provide land for community-related use, which was not anticipated at the time of the adoption of the comprehensive plan. And that rezoning is consistent with the policies and goals of the comprehensive plan. Drainage was identified in the comprehensive plan, as well as kind of the parks component. What is interesting is in the comprehensive plan, parking was actually deemed sufficient back in 2013. I think we definitely turned a page there and it's no longer sufficient and is a concern. So that would be one of the major areas in which this lot providing the parking is providing a service that wasn't identified back in 2013. A consideration really for the planning commission though is while the applicant is saying that the drainage, the park, and the parking is what his desire is, it should be noted that if it is rezoned to central business district, he could choose to do something else. He could do mixed use, he could do outdoor, you know, or eating, drinking, retail establishment, other professional services. That is once rezoned, those are use by right opportunities. So, you know, I think the piece he needs to consider is the parcel better suited for commercial or residential? And those are things we encourage you to talk with the applicant about. We talked with town staff and the fire marshal and are identifying that we do not have concerns. We of course see the value in both. And I think that's really the complexity before you and why we pose the question of, is it better residential or commercial? Because we recognize the value and need for housing. And we also recognize that parking and drainage are a big issue as well. And the applicant is proposing to solve both. So that's kind of our proposal and our analysis in a nutshell. And then of course, we'll turn it over to Ron, but do you have questions for me?
Any questions for staff?
I have one. So I just wanted to get a clarify. I heard you say that he could use this for more than 20 spaces with an SRU, and that's currently as it's zoned for high density residential. And then that's correct?
Right. He could go for an SRU, but he would not be able to use the lot as paid parking. He would just be able to increase the number of spaces available.
Okay, so the zoning is required to actually make it paid parking.
Right, because paid parking is considered an other commercial activity.
Thank you.
I have a question about the second bridge part of the packet. I think there's a couple different.
As I say, is Chris on?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
What mic is he?
He's
5.
It's up.
just get closer.
Okay. There we go. Yeah, the second bridge part of it is, I think, to me, seems like an important part. The idea that there is, one bridge for emergency services is, I think, a concern. And the other part was, before, I think, some of the events that have gone on in town, before they were as large as they are. It wasn't as necessary, but I mean, last few festivals, and we plan to do more and hopefully grow in that space. I think it's important. So, is it possible for a second bridge to be done with high density, or it has to be a CBD?
I mean, it could definitely be done under high, I mean, it gets a little complicated. I mean, obviously the bridge would need to be ideally a town-owned asset, so there's gonna be some sort of agreement made with the property owner. We are looking at 3 separate locations for a secondary bridge, but the applicant has offered this as one area, and I know there's a lot of interest in the way in which it connects, but there hasn't been any recent thorough conversations, and even that letter I included was from a couple years ago. And so the Board of Trustees plans to do a tour of all the secondary bridge locations in 2 weeks. And this applicant's parcel is in consideration even without a rezone.
Just for me, between that and the CBD with the paid parking, with the parking initiatives that, James together, last time we talked about the parking over by BNF, Conifer, down that side, having something where people can walk across and drive across. And also with ski season clogging up kind of the roundabout and going through town for locals coming off Big Springs, wanting to just hit the canyon. It just seems to be like, I don't know. I'd love to see what the Board of Trustees comes up with that. But that makes a lot of sense to me.
Questions?
A question on if it is rezoned to commercial and in the future, there would be a consideration for a building or something put there for a restaurant, whatever. Would that go to a special review or would that just be a given by right of ownership?
It's really going to depend on what it is that's being proposed. I'm just going to pull up the use group table. I believe outdoor drinking, or excuse me, just enclosed retail eating and drinking is used by right, as well as offices or other personal services. Mixed use is also used by right. Those are the 3 I listed in the AIM. A special review use could be determined necessary. And a lot of we can have consideration is, can we service it from a utility standpoint? But currently those are used by right. And that's something to consider as well. The applicant is not saying that that is his plan. If it's changed hands or anything to that extent happen, if it's zoned CBD, then there is an opportunity to do something other than what the applicant is proposing.
So 5,000 square feet or larger, special review,
Yeah,
which is not that large, but yes.
right. So so it takes us back to section 1660, which does talk about commercial, and it's 8,000 square feet or larger, or any commercial mixed use with over 4 residential units. Is that sorry?
Just for a little background, how long has it been parking there?
That will be an applicant question. I'm just trying to sort that out too, and I think the applicant can speak to that.
Okay.
6 years.
6 years.
And you haven't charged anything for.
We're in the staff question.
Write a staff question down.
Okay.
We'll have a chance to
I see.
scroll on questions here in a minute.
I have one question.
Sure.
You had mentioned that has 20 spaces, but there could be, under special review, it could be increased. That just by a special review application.
Correct. And I think the applicant can speak to this, but the applicant has a desire to do paid parking, not just increase the
I
number.
understand, but I just wanted to, because I guess we have always worked a little bit in the last couple of years around just that it was residential, it was 20. So there is an outlet for a parking lot.
Yes,
Okay. No matter what the zone is.
right.
Miranda, how many hypothetical residential units could be fit on that lot, given if we've done that calculation, obviously.
We really haven't, and I think that
Given the
that's,
setbacks and the fact that it's partially in the floodplain.
Yeah, closer to. you
Right.
Turned on.
I think we have not done those calculations, so I can't speak to that. And of course, the floodplains will have a significant impact. The applicant could speak to his initial proposal, which was a workforce housing, and I believe that that was 8 buildings and 4 units, but I don't want to speak for the applicant. I will let him share what his original plan was under his redevelopment for housing.
Tim, I could try to answer without being totally qualified, but it's 1 acre, so it's 4,000 square feet.
Right, on paper, you could fit like 12 units, but given the
Well, that's
setbacks,
what you're allowed to negotiate
the
for.
floodplain and everything.
No, but it doesn't matter, because you have that, we've done that many times.
Yeah.
Where that still gives you the property, that gives you the number to negotiate from.
And there are no setbacks in the CBD. So 100% of the lot could be built upon. Obviously, the,
Residential, he's asking.
oh, and if it was a straight residential, I'm sorry, yeah, so 4,000, right. Right.
But yes, and then we did that at the Boulder County because they used the floodplain and the whole area, the easement, but it still gives you that number
Right.
to negotiate.
Okay, so one final question, Miranda, you mentioned that the town staff didn't really have any concerns here, except there is a concern about drainage.
There is concern about drainage, and so JVA, as a part of our master infrastructure plan, came up and met with the applicant to look at the drainage coming down First Street. And so originally there was some speculation that maybe it was Ron's property that was running into the neighbors to the east and causing drainage problems. We did determine that it's the runoff coming off of First Street in our right of way. Ron has offered an easement. Mark Hall, who is our new streets manager as of December, is aware of that, but of course would like more time and opportunity to evaluate the drainage further before making that call that that's the right move. I think, of course, needs to see it firsthand and really start to navigate what are the complexities of drainage as a whole, not just that one area. And Mark is on tonight if you have any specific drainage questions.
But he's going to do that regardless of the outcome of this rezoning. Is that correct?
Right, yes, absolutely, and it's identified again in the comprehensive plan numerous times over, as well as our master infrastructure plan. But we want to make sure that whatever approach we take, it's not just related to this one section of First Street. I mean, it's a drainage issue across the CBD as a whole, and Mark would like to look at it from a more holistic standpoint.
Okay, makes sense. Okay, with that, I will ask Ron to come up and present his application. And then planning commission can follow up with any questions directly to Ron.
First, I'd like to thank Miranda for making the presentation for me, simply because of my hearing problem. I appreciate it very much. I only have one comment that I want to add to the details that she has presented. And that is that the IRS has made a ruling in my case that that I cannot take the maintenance expenses for all of my parking lots off my income tax unless I charge, because there's no taxable revenue for them, and they are treating this as a separate business. So I'm appealing it to the tax court. But at this point, this is one of the significant reasons that I'm applying for the rezoning.
Okay.
So I guess I stay here and answer
Yes,
questions.
so do you have any questions for Ron directly in the?
Yeah, I just
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
kind of answered right off the bat, because I was trying to understand motivation.
I can't hear you.
I was trying to understand kind of your motivation for changing it now. And that
I
explains a
can
lot with,
afford to
yeah.
do it without being able to deduct it from my taxes.
And how long have you been doing it as parking?
6 years.
6 years?
Yeah.
And what did you have? What was it before? Prior, was it just an empty lot that you owned?
It was an empty lot, and as Miranda said, she doesn't have any proof of what it was beforehand. It was a lot of things beforehand.
Sure.
In the 1800s, there was actually tents there for housing and outhouses. Then in the thirties, it was a livery stable. And when I went to make the parking lot, there were hundreds of horseshoes that we took out of the area and took to resmelting. After that, it was a wrecking yard for the Snyder's Garage across the street. And we also took out hundreds of car parts. We dragged them out or a magnet around and we couldn't stop getting things. So so I talked to a gentleman who was the chair of the Historical Society when the Historical Society owned that property. His name's Dan Martin. And he does have pictures of the livery stable and the wrecking yard. So and then there were 3 giant mansions at one time on the property. I think he has pictures though. So it's been everything. And at that time, during those periods, there was a bridge, and he has a picture of that at that crossing where Congress and Snyder could be connected. The property is almost 2 acres. And one of the questions from you as to why I changed the proposal. Well, times have changed, and my own personal situation with the IRS has changed. So, take a look at it, and there's no reason that under mixed use, you still couldn't put almost as much housing. And I still think it's a good idea to have housing. We need the housing, and I think that could be combined. So, I guess the question I think is, or I think the ordinance is that 35% of the main floor, or of course 30 feet, I can't remember what it is mandated to be commercial. But I don't remember what the ordinance is, but it's just being researched right now. So, any other questions?
I was also just wondering, you mentioned parking lots. I'm assuming you own a few other parking lots. Is that something that you?
Do I own other parking lots? Yes, all of the parking lots between 119 First Street, Snyder Street, and Second Street, including the ones on the north side of Second Street, are mine. Companies.
Gotcha. And then do you have, like, are there other businesses, restaurants, or stores, shops? I'm just curious what your history of businesses are, just to get an idea of motivation, again, of what you probably would stick with.
In terms of businesses?
Yeah, just curious.
Well, one of the things we used to have a good dentist here. There is no dentist. In terms of professional services, we're losing them. I have a group of 5 dentists, each of which would take one day periodontist to a regular practitioner, implants. All 5 of these guys, if they had a nice new clean facility, would take it in a heartbeat because they have determined that there's a big enough market that could be served. And a chiropractor called me a day or two ago, once the vacant building where the blind shop was. Unfortunately for him, I've leased it to an artist way ahead of time. So there is great demand for small commercial personal services. Every barber shop that's ever tried to exist in town has gone out of business. Every flower shop that's ever tried to make it in that home has gone out of business. So we need to have small units. One of my ideas in terms of doing this is to draw tourists and people in, have 10 by 10 booths. An interior court. I don't know if you've seen the plans that sit in City Hall for 6 years or not, but that's part of the plan. To draw tourists, to draw business that would also feed the other businesses. So businesses that are complementary to each other are things I'd like. I do not think another restaurant location would be a good idea at all. Every restaurant starves, coin phrase, in the wintertime. So personal services are needed. The plumber in town works out of his house. He'd love to have a shop somewhere. I get a lot of requests for those kind of things. And I think they're compatible. So, yeah, housing is still on the list, but I have a petition in your packet. Every single business on First Street, on the other side of the street, wants the parking lot. I didn't ask my tenants to sign the petition because in times past, people accuse me of saying to my tenants, if you don't sign this, you'll get evicted. But I can tell you they all would probably like it. I didn't ask them, I didn't approach them. Because I knew the cynic, whoever, wherever, would come up with that idea because they have before.
Thank you for all that.
I didn't hear your comments.
That's it, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions that you would like me to answer? Did I say there was 2 acres, almost 2 acres, a little less than 2 acres? And, yeah, for the, drainage easement is irrespective of this hearing. That's an offer that, stands regardless of what your decision is.
I have another question. This may not be necessarily to you, Ron, but is there any history of why this lot was originally zoned as high-density residential?
I was here while I was alive when everything was zoned, so in 1955, and I've studied the zoning. Boulder did zoning in 1955, and so my opinion is Nederland was kind of copycat. And where the zoning came down was what was there. So everybody got zoning to what existed at the time. That's where the zoning landed, was what the uses were then, is what it was zoned for. And I think there were some huge mistakes made in that zoning because they didn't get professional help. One of the zoning mistakes was to not zone down block faces, but to zone into a lot. So now we have a lot, for example, on the corner where Salto is, and then the shoe store, and then the zoning ends right there. That's a big mistake because the road's one way. People pull into those businesses and they turn around and violate the one way all the time. And that was incorrect zoning because it created a very big traffic hazard because 90% of the people that go to that shoe store turn around and go the wrong way on the one-way street. So there's other examples, but that's the grossest one, in my opinion.
Another one of my questions, similarly related, was when was it zoned?
I'm sorry?
When was it zoned? Was it 1955?
1955 is when things were zoned. It's also when 119 was paved.
Yes, thank you.
So it's been HDR since 1955, is that what you're saying?
Yes, it has. Nothing has been there since 1955. Well, when I bought it, there was an outhouse that was actively being used. And I couldn't figure out who was using the outhouse. There were campers who had pulled the walls over. They put the pallets down on the wetland there and on top of the pallets, they put door blanks and then they pulled the willows over so you couldn't see that there were people living and camping under the willows. And they were using the outhouse. Had to evict the campers which they were shouting.
Apparently that SRU was lost in the files.
I'm sorry, sir. Can you hear
No, I was going to say, I was joking that apparently that SRU was lost in the files. Okay, any other questions for Ron? Go ahead.
Ryan, when did you buy the property?
I think it was 2016.
That's not that long ago.
No, 16, 22, yeah, 6 or 7 years ago.
2016. Yeah.
Did you pull up the county record?
Yeah, I'm looking at that right now. It was almost exactly January 11th, 2016.
Yeah, that's what I thought. It wasn't 19, just the history. It wasn't 1955. It was fairly recent.
Yeah, Rod hasn't owned that property for just last few
He's
years.
just been here for it.
You have too, Roger.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anything else for Ron at this point? If not, I will open the hearing to public comment. And first, I'll ask anyone who is going to speak in favor of this application to come up and speak. Is there anyone in favor of it? Yes, please come up, give your name and address, and you have 3 minutes.
Share me that. You'll do the push button.
Test.
Yeah, that's on.
May Gerald, Nederland. I haven't lived here as long as Ron, but over the years, I've come to appreciate Ron as one of the people that loves this town as much as I do. I reviewed his plans for downtown development, for workforce housing, his parking. I have heard people say at meetings, well, we don't like Ron because he had a tiff with a beloved woman in town, Kay Horowitz, about 35 years ago, and he has never been forgiven for that. I think it's time to move forward. I want to encourage you to think about the 2013 plan called for the creation of the second bridge within 5 years. Ron's offered an easement. I don't know what the other two locations are, but let's say that Ron does sell the property and that the new owner doesn't offer the easement option. So I would say post haste, the committee should come to a decision to move forward. Our downtown has been crippled for a long time by this anti-Ron sentiment. I used to be part of that sentiment, and I will tell you, I believe Ron is a compassionate man that has helped a lot of people in these dwellings that he hasn't upgraded to modern standards. He's helped a lot of people. And I think we just need to get serious about our town and fix the inside out. Start with the inside and move out. If he's submitting a plan, my guess is it's probably better engineered and better planned than probably anything else the town is doing. So I can't believe I'm saying this, but I totally support the commission's working with Ron, getting on this bridge, and not procrastinating and stringing this thing along for reasons that we can only guess. Thank you.
Thank you, May.
Thanks.
Yeah, Ron, you can respond at the end after we hear
But
the,
this is important. If you don't mind, I want to correct May in that the easement I've offered is for drainage off the street to the property on the south. I've not made an offer of an easement for the bridge at this time in any formal manner, or even an informal manner. It's been part of a discussion. It's not an offer.
give that clarification.
Sorry. Kathleen Jemai
Okay.
has her hand up online.
Oh,
Chairman.
okay,
I do want to note for the record that Commissioner Herring did join us during.
okay, thank you. Okay, Kathleen, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
We can. So you have 3 minutes. Name and address, please.
Kathleen Chipai, 32-year East Mag resident, 19-year business owner. I'm in support of changing this into commercial and CBD, and I think it's realistic for the uses. I did read the comments in the packet against it, and they're coming from people who chose to either purchase or rent right next to the central business district. So I don't think that, well, I think that if they didn't want to live in the downtown area, as May Gerald just said, we're supposed to be building from the inside out, and we're supposed to be building up in the inside, and apparently those people didn't read our comp plans or our master plans. So I think we should just go along with this. And then I do have a concerning comment, though, from the presentation by Miranda. For years now, she's been saying that paid parking requires an SRU because it's outdoor sales. And tonight, for the first time, I've heard paid parking is considered, quote, other commercial activity. I find that bothersome because Mr. Mitchell has a use by right to do paid parking in the central business district, and there's nothing in the code that prevents him from charging. He shouldn't need an SRU for any paid parking in the central business district. And it's very ironic to me because when he wanted to do paid parking on North First Street in the lots where the farmers market's been operating, for years I've been asking why they didn't need an SRU for outdoor sales. And I'm told they have a use by right, but somehow to Ron's lot to make sales and pay taxes on those sales. And Ron didn't have the right to, he's not making sales. He's charging a fee. There's a difference between a fee and a sale. And I'm really sad I had to bring this up in my public comment right now, but I did because of what Miranda just said. So I don't believe Ron Mitchell, per the code, has to do an SRU for paid parking in the central business district at all. And I'm basing that on how commercial sales outdoor, it's use by right. And that's why the farmers market hasn't had to do an SRU, and I don't believe Ron should have to do an SRU for paid parking either. And I'm going to be against it. And I'm sick of the fact that this keeps getting ignored. We all have the same rights. Some people don't get to get special rights while other people get treated differently. And that other lot on North First is the prime example, because the farmers market can make outdoor sales and actually pay retail sales tax, and Ron can't charge for people parking, and nor can he write it off. But it's a use by right to Ron, just like it's a use by right to them, and he's not making sales. He's charging a fee. It's a rental fee. And that doesn't require an SRU in the CBD. So that's my public comment. Thank you.
That's because it's CBD, right? Miranda, do you want to respond to that?
Do you want me? So currently there is an SRU agreement for paid parking, and we have determined that paid parking is considered other commercial activity, which does require an SRU.
Okay. Anyone else who wants to speak in favor of the application? Okay, hearing none, I will now turn it over to those who wish to speak against the application. Whoever wants to go first, please name and address. You have 3 minutes, unless you
have 12.
You have 12, that's right.
Do you want to just clarify for the record who had asked or gave you their 3 minutes?
Sue McDonough ceded her time, Martina Patterson ceded her time, and Brett and Sarah Bishop ceded their time. Thanks for being here and serving our community. Good evening. My name is Teresa Robertson. I live on 140 East First Street, and I've owned that property for 22.5 years. You will note my letter that was submitted in your packet. These comments are in addition to what was shared in my letter. Since that packet was submitted yesterday, 3 additional East First Street neighbors have signed on for a total of 8 neighbors on East First Street who are in agreement and support my letter's content. To address a recent comment made, the central business district has moved into our neighborhood. We were here before the comprehensive plan. To review, the neighbors who are opposed to approving the zoning change include Kelvin Dodd, owner. Kelvin owns the property that's adjacent to Mr. Mitchell's lot, and who has lost all his privacy on his property upon the non-permitted construction of Mr. Mitchell's moat and elevated walkway. His address is 128 East First Street. He's on that property since approximately 1982. Melissa and Brian Dower, they've owned 125 East First Street since March of 2020. Sue McDonough, 130 East First Street. She's owned that property for 15 years. Deb Smiley, 139 East First Street, has been there for 38 years. Martina Patterson, 15-year resident on 154 East First Street. Brett and Sarah Bishop, 158 East First Street. They've owned the property for 8 years, but Brett's been there for over 20. Randy Lee, former trustee and resident for at least 38 years, 171 East First Street. Bottom line, Approving this variance opens the gate for Mr. Mitchell to tear down the Nederland that attracts tourists here. Let's be clear. This zoning change decision is the essential linchpin that Mr. Mitchell needs to allow his entire redevelopment project to unfold. In Mr. Mitchell's successful game of Monopoly with Nederland property, he has made a calculated choice over the years to neglect maintenance on his properties so he can claim how they need to be torn down. The consequences of your decisions are immense. Myself and my neighbors' primary concern is infrastructure. We do not have the infrastructure to support the consequences of this zoning change. Our town already struggles to support our infrastructure needs. Look at your water bill. It goes up all the time because we need to support sewage. Another example is the need to upkeep the streets and pathways that already exist here. And we can see that there's a struggle there also. And it's not to malign the people that are working for the town, they're working their butts off. The other infrastructure we're lacking right now is police force to support this proposed growth. Again, we are lacking and actually behind. The Planning Commission needs to concentrate on local improvements rather than expansion and development. Mr. Mitchell's tax issue should not even be a mitigating factor. If he has the resources to continue to purchase real estate in our town, he has the resources for taxes. He promised to build housing to our neighbors. There were 25 of us. There was a mediator and everything. 6 years ago, he knew it was high-density residential when he purchased that land. Instead, he made it into a parking lot and a hop farm. The lot remains a parking lot. I am not interested in Mr. Mitchell's development dream to recreate Nederland to look like Black Hawk or Breckenridge. I live in Nederland, Colorado, and cherish the charm of our town. Mr. Mitchell claims to want to make Nederland better, yet he cuts down the trees on his property. Majestic pines that he girded the roots on, and an aspen that could have been repurposed adjacent to the Wings of Lace building. Key points I'd like to reiterate from my letter. Mr. Mitchell's lot extends much further down East First Street than the Snyder Garage. It really impinges into our First Street neighborhood. I would invite anyone to walk down there and experience that. Its zoning impact would affect our residential neighborhood character. It abuts private residents. If Mr. Mitchell's concerned about drainage, I would invite him to plant a row of trees, which we've asked him, why don't you just put some trees there, Ron? Give your neighbors some privacy. Be a good neighbor. That would be neighborly. It would afford the privacy that was removed from 128 East First Street. Lastly, and perhaps more importantly, our experience with Mr. Mitchell is that he has not been a good neighbor. He has not demonstrated acting in good faith for anyone's interest other than his own. We are not in favor of a bridge access being used as leverage to grant Mr. Mitchell what he desires for his property. As what was mentioned, there are 2 other sites being considered for secondary bridge location, and I applaud the town for exploring those options. In my almost 23 years of being a Nederland resident, I have observed that what Mr. Mitchell says he's going to do and what he does are more often than not congruent. His word is not to be trusted. He came here tonight alluding to building housing. I would not believe that. A dentist's office would necessitate specialized plumbing and again, impact our strained sewage system. You just can't have a dentist's office. You have to have special plumbing for a dentist's office. Mr. Mitchell owns most of downtown Nederland, yet he does not live here. His desires and decisions have impact on those who live and work here. Ron Mitchell lives in Boulder, not Nederland. I don't want to live in Boulder West, in the mountains. We do not need more parking, we need housing. We are not in favor of a change in zoning to CBD. There are other options to consider to meet our parking needs that would not involve cajoling Mr. Mitchell. I implore the Planning Commission to deny Mr. Mitchell's request for a zoning change. And I'm speaking not just for East First Street, but for all of Nederland. If your decision is to go forward with Mr. Mitchell's change of zoning request, then I strongly encourage you to place the deed restriction on that change so that the lot remains with the initial purposes requested by Mr. Mitchell. I've heard like 4 different things tonight even. Ron Mitchell is not going to have to live with the consequences of his misplaced development dream of improving Nederland. I will, and you will. Ron Mitchell will not. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Teresa. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak against this application? Ron, I'm going to give you a chance to go up and if you need to respond. If there's no other speaker.
There's somebody.
So I think Kelvin, is that Kelvin, you raising your hand? And you're muted, but you were unmuted. And then I said Sandra also.
It might have been me. Sorry, guys. I'm technically challenged with this particular type of software. I actually just have a few questions. I don't really have.
Name and address, please.
Yeah, I apologize. My name's John Mountain, and I live in Nederland. I am on 5 Sundown Trail. I'm new to the town, so I'm new to a lot of. I'm being exposed to a lot of the ideas that are coming to surface here. So a couple of questions. It sounds to me like there's been a sewer problem. I've understood there to be also a walkway access problem, in particular with the ice and other things that are happening with this strange weather this year. I'm curious to know, would the parking changes include better walkway access and possibly ADA facilitation? I'm particularly confused about a couple things with regard to taking care of our handicapped population in town. So that's my question. It's just a question, and then also to tack onto that, would there be taxes included in the collection of the parking fees, which possibly could help with some of the sewer costs that the town is discussing right now tonight? Thank you. I don't know if that was clear.
Okay, thank you. Maybe Ron can answer the question on the.
I think you may still have more comments. Do you want to wait until the end? I don't know. Kelvin, is that, I think that's you. Do you want to comment? You're still, oh, there you are. You're muted. Kelvin, you're still muted.
Miranda, are you talking to me, Andrew, or
No,
someone
Andrew,
else?
do you also want to make a comment? These are comments. So I think Kelvin is off mute. I think trying to.
I'll wait until that gets sorted out. If someone else has something to say.
Okay.
Okay. You're muted. Unmute. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Kelvin Dodd, 128 East First Street. I am Ron's neighbor. I want the town to understand that I am not against development. Technically, I'm not against the concept of moving this from residential to business use. However, I'm very concerned about a history of lack of communication when pursuing plans like this. One of the issues that was brought up that I'd like to discuss very quickly is the issue of drainage. If you have a moment to take a look at page 12 of the package, that shows the contours of the property Ron had when he purchased it. And if you look at those contour lines, you can see that there's drainage from First Street straight across that property. And the first thing that was done is a huge amount of excavation when Ron purchased the property, which completely changed the contours, which give us now the drainage image that you see on page 4, where First Street cannot drain onto that property because there's actually a retaining wall. So all of the drainage from First Street continues down the road until it finds the first chance it has to get back to the creek, which is my property. So that's a concern, and that's something I would have liked to have addressed before Ron pursued the project that he was planning on doing. And I'm just very concerned that if there is a change to business use, what businesses are going to go in there, what kind of communication is going to happen, and what kind of use is going to be made of it. I can't see this place being used as a parking lot for very long. That's it. My words.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else?
Andrew Dewar.
Andrew?
I'm not, I guess, speaking not necessarily against anything.
Name and address, please.
Okay, sorry. Andrew Dewart, 787 West First Street. And I will say that coming at this neither necessarily for or against it. However, what I did hear was that someone mentioned that like specialized plumbing was required for a dentist office. And as a licensed general contractor, I would just take disagreement with that. There's no specialized plumbing requirements regarding tying into the city sewer. So, yes, in a dentist's office, there's certainly requirements about plumbing and what dentists use in your mouth and clean water. But beyond that, in the drain, there's nothing unique about a dentist's office versus a veterinarian's office versus anything else. So that's all I wanted to clear up. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? If not, Ron, I'd like to ask you if you needed to reply to any comments that were made by the public.
Yes, I would like to make comments, quite a few. I agree with Mr. Dodd that communication could be better. However, when we built this parking lot, the survey does show that before we built it, water went directly on his property from the lot. So we designed it and engineered it so that it doesn't. The entire lot slants to the west and was changed to do that specifically to keep the water off of his property. The town engineer, a gentleman by the name of Nathan Skullock, has been over there and looked at it. The water that comes down First Street primarily can go into a ditch that runs right along the Valley marijuana shop. It's designed to collect the water. It has a little pond that cleans the water, and it has a drain that puts the water back into the water table. Very little water escapes from the settling pond, and it does enter there. One thing that Mr. Scully did determine, and I think we've solved it with the cooperation of the town public works staff, is that in years past, the huge pile of snow has been piled up by the utility pole right at the corner of the lot. This melts and runs right down on his property. So Public Works plowed that big pile of snow right into the retention pond at my request. And I think they'll be almost solve the problem, because there's probably 2,000 gallons of water in that pile each year, and every year it's been piled that way for many years. And so that's one of the things that we found created part of the water flow problem in the spring, was the melting of that huge pile of snow. So I do wish to correct the gentleman, and the planning was made and carefully made, and has been determined by Mr. Skylick to be effective in terms of not putting water on his property. So am I wrong, or? Can't read. I mean, you'll have to help me with the questions because I've missed a few. I do wish to address some of the things that Mrs. Robertson has said. And I'll say this in prefacing this. She has been very vocal about her views. In the years that I've owned the property in the downtown area, which is about 4 years, first property I ever bought was the rock shop. I've never had and have to tell someone they were not allowed on my property, no matter what their political view was, no matter what they, even if they hated me with a passion. She is the only person that I've ever told she can never come back on my property. And the reason is very simple. She accosted me at the farmer's market, screaming in front of a public meeting, her views. I took that as an insult, and I told her to get off my property. I told her never come back. Some of the things she's said, as far as I'm concerned, are outright slander. I have affirmed tonight that I'm still interested in putting housing on the site. I did then. I acknowledge that it was my original intent, and it can be done. But I see a better use. I see a better opportunity for the town, and it's going to be your job to determine what the public interest is at this time and in the future. I'm going to go over her letter and make comments. Bear with me because I'm going to have to use my phone flashlight to read it. It's also off turned on. He states here that I agreed to develop a parcel into high density housing. I don't know as I did. I was told before that meeting by my attorney to make no commitments whatsoever, but I did.
Stop. Please let him speak.
At that meeting, I agreed to meet with them, but I brought a mediator because more like the meeting was attempted to be more like a lynch mob than a discussion of the problems of the neighborhood. So I am interested in putting housing there, but if we come to an agreement on some sort of right away for the bridge within this whole next few meetings that I'm going to come before you, that will certainly impact where housing would go, how much there would be, and what type it would be. I am all in favor of workforce housing, and I do have a project in the works now to present to you soon, right west of the RTD lot that's coming up. So I haven't changed my intent, and I didn't make any commitment to do something within a time frame. And so I don't think that argument in the first paragraph is very valid. In your packet is a petition signed by almost every business on the south side of 2nd Street. And as I mentioned, I didn't ask my tenants to sign it because I didn't want someone to be cynical and say I was forcing them to. They all want more parking. The plan, which is outdated at this point, but there was a parking study done. And in that study, it showed 152 cars on this lot. In reality, that's unrealistic given the fluid and the floodplains. But a lot more cars can be parked there, and I think should be, and I think it would be easy to. So that's my feeling. You're the judges. She states that parking shouldn't be an issue over which the town has agency. The town to determine the cost of parking. That's not free enterprise, that's communism. And we've gone through that, and I brought this parking issue before you. Many of you were not on the board at the time, but it's a right in a commercial zone. You should charge for services. And that became a huge debate. I paid your town attorney $6,000 to go through this hearing once before, and not this one, the parking hearing. Apologize. I spoke there. They're in favor of bricks, but that's wonderful. At least we have one or two points we can agree on, and I'm glad of that. She mentions in her letter a river walk. None of the river walk is designed to go anywhere near the properties to the east of my property. The river walk would start on the west side of my property, go through the back of the business community, all in the CBD. None of it would be in the residential nature. So she has not researched this well. I'm trying to be very careful in how I phrase things and how I say things, and accuse me of the things she has, in my opinion, are outright slander. She accuses me of not being a good neighbor. That's an opinion. I've tried to be a good neighbor. I've tried to be a good neighbor as best I can throughout the town where I own property. She accuses me of not maintaining my properties. They're all maintained very well. The Sweet Sue building has just been repainted. It was repainted last August, and all of the equipment, the furnaces, the plumbing is pretty much up to code. But in an old building like that, you can't get up to code no matter how hard you try. New water heaters were put in the Sweet Sue's. New flooring was put in. The inspection for the fire suppression system is up to code. So when she makes an accusation like that, she has no proof. She's never been in the building. She doesn't know what my budget is. I spend 30% of my income on maintenance on these old places. They take a lot of maintenance, as any old building does, and any of you that own one know that. So this is an attempt, again, to try and discredit me as not being a good citizen. I really resent it. So that's the end of my comment. If you can think of any of the other things that were brought up I should address, please ask me because I can't remember them. But these are what I feel were the important issues in terms of their objections.
Ron? We said anything new that was not brought up before? If you wish to address it, you have time now. Otherwise, we're going to close the public hearing. And Planning Commission, if you have questions for staff or Ron, we'll do that now.
Chairman, can I just make one mention and just something that I think the Planning Commission should be aware of, that there is a housing study that has started and is anticipating an end date at the end of this year, which will do a kind of an analysis of our housing needs, of the available stock, zoning and code. And so I do think it's important for you to be aware that housing needs assessment has started and will end.
So that's this year.
Yes, and we expect to have a preliminary results of that end of summer, if not early fall.
Thank you. Please be brief.
Yes, definitely. So Mr. Mitchell just came up here and his whole rebuttal was trying to slander me. But I read something and I expressed an opinion that just not only represented my opinion and my experience with Mr. Mitchell over the years, but those of my fellow neighbors. So that's what I'd like you to know, that I'm not just representing myself, I'm representing my majority of my First Street neighbors.
Yes, you said that. Thank you. Okay, at this point, I'm going to close the public hearing and we'll open it up to the Planning Commission for questions at this point, and then we'll do some discussion. Okay, 3-minute break. All right, we'll take just a short break before we do that. 3 minutes. Take advantage of it.
We're not gonna get one at the end.
Get a second one.
Do you want to say that on so everyone can hear your question? Commissioner? Oh, it is going to be publicly noticed, so I'm happy to just share. The secondary bridge tour is going to start at the Weir Bridge on Tuesday, February 7th at 10 a.m. It's a public meeting, so it's the 7th. On 10 a.m. So at the Weir Bridge by Teamsy, little skinny bridge. Yeah.
And they're going to visit every potential site, is that correct?
That is their current intention.
Okay, so we're reconvened. Does anyone have any questions for either staff or for the applicant based upon what you heard? If not, we will move into discussion.
I do have a question.
Okay.
Ron, this is Jim Reese. And I wanted to, you referenced a engineering report for drainage, but you didn't include that. Was there a full report you mentioned, you mentioned that you had the property looked at by the town engineer, Mr. Skalick.
Skylick.
Yeah. Was there an engineering report done that we can?
No, he very carefully qualified his analysis with he'd have to do further research.
But I did paste into the AIM under drainage on page 4 of our AIM, which is in 8 of the packet, what his comments were, if that's the indented comment.
And I think I referenced that in my narrative.
Yes.
I was careful to try and do that.
Okay, I just wanted to find out if there'd been a full engineering report, but that's something that would happen as that got developed at a future time.
Okay, I actually misunderstood your question, and I thought you were asking about a drainage report during the construction of the current retention pond. And I had an engineer look at it, but I didn't get a full-fledged signed stamp document from him.
Okay. Is that something you could send to us so we could have that to reference?
Well, I had it surveyed. I leased it out. And he was involved in contouring and that sort of thing, kind of on an informal basis, but he did straighten out some property discrepancies. There was a foot or foot and a half, maybe 2 foot no man's land between the east property and mine, and he resurveyed it to where it's now at what's called an ALTA survey, ALTA, which is a basically bona fide certified stamp the best thing you can get survey.
Okay, thank you.
So the map that's in the packet is from Lee, is that right? I guess I'm confused as to.
I think the map that's in the packet is a Google.
I put Lee survey. I have 2 maps that I put in there from Lee.
Lee survey.
Yes, that's on page, let's see what page is it? 14?
They're the surveys that you had provided under paid parking.
Yeah, and I think that survey shows a shed encroaching on my property. I've since made a deal with the former property owner of that property, and the shed's been moved. I actually gave them the shed if they'd agree to move that one, so they put the new shed directly on their property, so that's not an issue, although it appears to be in that survey.
Yeah, that was confusing to me, so.
Yeah, near the creek, that little property line's right straight through it. That's going on, so.
So I do want to just speak to Vice Chair Reese's question. So your engineer did submit a letter when you had your retention or your retaining wall in place, and basically what they say in the letter is that they're not really able to speak to the drainage, but they did feel that the dry stacked large stone retainage solution is very compatible with the particular pond layout, as such a large retainage failure would not risk compromise of the pond containment. So in essence, what Ron did to grade the retaining wall was not a concern to the engineers that you had at the time for the proposed retention pond. I don't know if that's all your question, but.
Well, I guess I just was wondering if you had something that was a full report that you came up and you disputed the public comment that there was drainage issues, and you said you had work done and that everything drains onto your property. And so I was just wondering if there was a full report somewhere that backs it up, other than a couple of statements here that I keep reference with a larger engineering report.
I think we're talking about two sets of engineering.
Yeah, and we did not ask JVA to prepare an engineering report. This was a relatively informal meeting, but JVA did confirm with our former streets manager, Emmett Pelletier, and Cynthia Baki, that the drainage is coming from town right of way. And that this is ultimately a larger issue for a town to resolve under our master infrastructure plans, and something that Mark Hall, streets manager, will look into when appropriate.
Okay, thanks very much. But so certainly there will be a report at a later time if that gets developed.
Correct. Once Mark is ready to pursue it, then of course we will invest in JVA engineering time. But this analysis was occurring at the time in which we were identifying what are our MIP priorities, and this drainage came up as one of those. But now is not the appropriate time to invest in engineering plans when we haven't identified what solution we want to pursue.
Okay, thank you.
Regardless of the rezone, depending upon what happens to that lot, that will have to be done. Or not.
The
Nothing
zoning
happens.
doesn't care about the flood.
That's what I'm saying. Exactly.
Exactly. There was a lot of chatter over things that's not really in the discussion today.
Okay, any other questions or?
I've got a question.
Yeah.
Are there any other mechanisms other than the rezoning through which, say, paid parking could be approved?
I need to get to the use group too. Give me a remote. I don't believe. So you're not going to do any sort of spot zoning, and so it's only allowed special review use for outdoor commercial activity in neighborhood commercial, CBD, and general commercial. And we have, as I said earlier, have determined this is a outdoor commercial activity under other.
So the answer is
Yeah,
no.
the answer is no, without the rezone to CBD.
Thank you.
I have a question on the amount of, or the number of parking spaces, the maximum that could be allowed on that parcel. Is there a,
Because it would go through an SRU, I think the applicant would need to, of course, bring forward plans that show how the parking would fall within the floodplain and address drainage. But there's no set amount, because that would be reviewed under the SRU.
and then the traffic flow, the way the traffic flow would also affect.
Right. I think also under the SRU, those would be requirements of the application to demonstrate the feasibility of increased parking.
Okay,
I have another question for Mr. Mitchell. Trying to look at you. Okay. There. So one of it wasn't phrased as a question, but it has been brought up the possibility of having a deed restriction if the property were to be rezoned. Is that something you would be open to?
Yes.
Thank you.
yeah, I was going to bring up the deed restriction. Maybe this is a question for Attorney Madsen or for town staff, but could you explain a little bit more about a deed restriction? And what that entails or how that works?
Right, so it sounds like the question was whether the applicant would agree to a deed restriction on the property. And as I understand it, the deed restriction would be to limit the use to only using the property if it's rezoned to CBD as a parking lot and no other permitted use that's allowed in the CBD. Sounds like the applicant has agreed to that deed restriction. And when the deed would be recorded, the deed restriction would be recorded on the property. And so the applicant as the owner would be bound by that restriction and by that use. And any future purchasers would be bound by that deed restriction as well. So those people can only use it as a parking lot and not as a, not construct a building that's a restaurant. There are other ways to impose that condition. It would just be a condition of the ordinance, the zoning ordinance, rezoning it, that the condition is that the property is used as a parking lot. Yes.
Because that was my confusion, is the difference between deed restriction and the conditions under which the rezoning goes into the ordinance. Today, maybe I'm not making myself clear, but what the difference between a deed restriction and condition on a rezone?
Generally, a deed restriction is a private contract between two parties. So, homeowners, covenants, those types of things are deed restrictions on the property. That's a private contract. What we would want to do if there was a deed restriction of the town is make the town be able to be the enforcer of the restriction. But a better way to go about it would be to put a condition in the rezoning ordinance that the use is parking. But it sounds like, and I'm not sure why, but Mr. Mitchell said he wouldn't agree to that, and I don't understand the difference. Why he would
That was my confusion, was he agreed to a deed restriction, but not to a condition under a rezone.
Well, I didn't understand
So,
exactly what.
Ron, you should come to the mic because we have a commissioner online.
The gentleman made a general statement as to a deed restriction, and the way the town attorney defined it, I would agree to it. But that's a matter, I think, of negotiation. If you were to say you wanted only housing and a parking lot, that might be practical, but I'm not going to commit at this point in time. But I think if she says there's other ways to do something better, I think you should listen to her.
Okay, you want to follow up on that, or with the?
No, I mean, just that the deed restriction is a separate document, is separate from, and is typically a private document. Whereas if the applicant is agreeable to this type of condition, then it should just be part of the rezoning ordinance. And it does the same thing.
Okay.
But it's packaged together with the rezoning ordinance.
Okay, that was my thought, but then I got confused.
I just wanted to follow up on that with you, Attorney Benson. Does that transcend owners?
Yes.
Your housing needs study, at least the last one, and I'm doing another one, specifically identified smaller units as a need. But one of the problems with that is for a smaller unit, you have to pay same plant investment fee as you do for a larger unit. This discourages what has actually been identified as what's needed, because to build a small unit that produces less revenue, you have to pay the same amount of money as, for instance, to build a studio apartment, 700 square feet. And you have a 500 or a 2,000 square foot 5-bedroom unit. The plant investment fee is the same for both. So there's a disparity economically. It's a burden. So somewhere in between, there is something that must be compelled. I think housing, both needs are paramount, parking and housing. I could do without the commercial in that area. So, again, you asked for a general answer, and I said yes. Getting to specifics now. If you want to work on that more, very amenable to doing so. But here we are at the end of the hearing, and this has come up as a question, and neither you nor I have had much time to consider it.
So let me be just a little bit more specific, just ask it really directly. So would you be amenable, whether it's through a deed restriction or a attachment to the zoning ordinance, would you be amenable to restricting it to paid parking and housing and nothing else? And you can say, I don't know.
Going to say, I want to think about it.
Fair enough.
Okay, yeah, yes, Roger.
It's a hearing for rezone. I feel like we're getting into too much negotiating on all these pros and cons. I would like to have us at least go around and just see how we feel about the rezone.
We're going to do that.
I know, we're,
Questions out and I wanted to make it, find
I'm
out
okay.
what options we had.
I'm okay, but I'm
Okay.
just making my point too. Because I don't think we've even discussed the reason, we figured out everything but a reason.
Well, yeah, we're looking at,
That's fine.
fully understand the options here, okay? Are there any other questions, Timmy?
I got one.
Not hearing you.
I'm not speaking yet. Would the zoning change be necessary, this is for Miranda and Jennifer, would the zoning change be necessary in order to ultimately one day, whether it's next year or 20 years from now, put the bridge in? And that's whether or not Ron owns the property. We need to change the zoning to ultimately have a bridge there. So I recognize and appreciate that's a pretty awesome spot for a bridge if there ever was one.
I maybe turn to Attorney Madsen a little bit. I think it kind of depends, like, is the bridge then considered like municipal infrastructure, in which case it is allowed use by right in just about every zone. Obviously, we're connecting to a private property, and as the applicant noted, there's more discussion there. But I think, and Attorney Madsen, correct me if maybe you feel differently, that it would fall under kind of this municipal facilities uses operated by town infrastructure.
Well, and it just depends on how it happens and what it looks like. And, Miranda's right that the bridge could go over the property, but, do you have to build a street then? Do you have to put in a right of way? And then have negotiations with the property owner related to that. So there's a lot of steps that would take place before, in that process.
Yeah, I fully understand that, but my question is purely just, whether the owner is Ron or somebody else and they agree with the town and they want to facilitate this bridge. Is that doable, whether it's zoned high density as it is currently or CBD?
Yes.
Okay.
And just note too, that the town has a lot of authority on its own to change the zoning.
Yeah.
We don't
Like-
have to have it.
Like to add that into the allowable high density.
Yeah, I mean, the use table could be changed, could be amended, or the town could decide that we want to zone this. There's a public zone, isn't there?
Correct.
Yeah, so it could be zoned public.
Yeah. Gotcha. Cool, thank you.
Well, not if it's private property, right?
Right, I think there is this section of municipal facilities and uses operated by town, and that's both governmental and quasi-governmental services. And it is used by right in basically every zone. With hearings, you have to run it through the Nederland public process. But I think that's where I would view that to become, end up being a town asset. It's not a private bridge that they would construct. It would be a landowner for giving the town access to the land for us to construct the bridge.
Okay, any other questions before we turn it into discussion amongst the planning commission members? Okay, Chris, let's start with you. We'll go around the horn. Tell
Yeah,
us-
I like the aspect of rezone with restrictions. I think parking, housing is part of our, I think both initiatives are important. I think that also threads the needle of, what's probably going to be best for the neighborhood close by, keeping it limited to those things, something that already is and something that we desperately need, which is more housing. So for me, I'm in favor with restrictions, unless that's an issue. So, but that's that's kind of where I'm.
Okay, Timmy?
Yeah, I mean, from the hip, I think it's reasonable. It's a reasonable change, but zoning changes are a really big deal. And I don't think they're to be taken lightly. They can certainly set a dangerous precedent, moving forward. And I fully understand and appreciate the sentiment of the neighbors nearby. I think when you buy a property, 20, 40 years ago, or even last year, and you spend your last dollar buying it, you have a certain understanding and expectation of what's possible on that lot. And it needs to be a pretty big deal to change that. Section, what is it, 16-255 in the code outlines the reasons that the towns decided, like, these are the extenuating circumstances where we would allow zoning change. And I think, yeah, there's a moderately good argument on a couple of them as far as adding benefit to the community. And I certainly very, very much appreciate everything Ron's done in the community and is potentially offering with this parcel. But I just don't really see the extenuating circumstance, under those valid reasons to change zoning, in this case. So, yeah, in summary, I think zoning changes it's a really big deal. And, the neighbors, it's kind of a basic principle of real estate and why one buys real estate, where they buy it, and, if we go around, just changing things for pretty good reasons, but not like this, not the best reason. I think that starts to get kind of scary. So that's it.
Okay, thank you. Mike?
Yeah, to second that I think zoning change is a really big deal. I'm also very sensitive to business district encroaching into residential territory. I just thought you said it very well, that buy a piece of property, but it was 20 years ago, 40 years ago, or last year. I do have an expectation that change, if necessary, will be respectful. And personally, I was living right next to the property. Doesn't matter who owns it. I don't think that I'd want a big business moving in right next door. And so the use as a parking lot or housing would seem to thread the needle. That's just might be an okay use with it. Like if I was living right next to it, that would be a hard pill to swallow. I don't think, the conversation about whether or not to put in a bridge is preliminary because there's not been any offer. I think the drainage is also, perhaps a nuisance that's not really a consideration in the rezoning conversation. I think generally I don't. So parking is a need in town, as it is housing. I do not think this needs to be rezoned unless it is permanently constrained to parking and housing.
Stephanie, you're still online?
I certainly am. Thank you.
Your thoughts, please?
Yeah. Thanks. And I think a lot of my comments were summarized by Timmy. I'm in alignment there. It just shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. I think that the code and the zones that we have are to change those really should it should be a heavy lift, and we have whether it be a setback, whether it be any of the provisions that we have in there really requires a far more in-depth, robust discussion, I think, than one planning commission meeting. And I just I think that in this particular case, we're kind of weighing out the value of various needs within our community, and that from while I wish we could meet all of them, we live in a town with limited space and resources, but in this particular case, I think that the criteria for meeting those extenuating circumstances for why we would change the zoning in a particular location, that threshold just hasn't been met in my mind. So at this point, I would vote to keep the zoning the same. We think that, again, people buy their property knowing what zone that they're in, and that has meaning in particular for the community around them as well. So in particular, I would be very nervous about setting a precedent here that, and if we do this, then if someone else doesn't like the zoning of their property, under what circumstances would we have to start reconsidering all of those requests? So I think we should approach things like this with extreme care and ensure that there's really a compelling circumstance, and I'm just not sure I see it here. To me, it's for paid parking, but not necessarily for revenue for the town. So it's I think it's a challenging one for me to support at this time.
Okay, thank you. Linda?
I think I have to side with what Timmy and Mike said, that I don't see the need right now for the rezoning, because if we open the door for that, it will definitely impact the neighbors and property owners in residential areas have a voice also, and I think theirs needs to be heard as well. The rezoning right now isn't that crucial as to this being a parking lot. So I think we need further discussion, a little more in-depth discussion on this. And so right now, I don't feel the rezoning is appropriate.
Okay. Roger?
Yeah, I wasn't really, maybe I was getting short, but my comments before were to have this kind of discussion to get there. And then if we felt that we needed to do different things, that we could put conditions, and we at least needed to get to this point. That is why I was just a little bit, made the statement I did. Can we, just get the answer to the question? What I feel about this is that, yes, the 1655, the zoning challenge, the time to appeal, that this property actually, we did get some history here, but our new zoning ordinance that we've been working with actually was worked on in 1980 and then was approved in 1982. And we've actually used this ordinance since then, so 40 plus years. And there's certainly this, you've all read the statements, there are certainly statements there. If it was zoned wrongly, there was certainly a period for challenging that, and that's long gone, that idea that, oh, it's been zoned wrongly or misappropriately. So, we've gone through that. So I think the 16255, we don't fit that criteria. Couple of things that we just came up tonight was that there's going to be a housing study. So that's a good thing, that, a good reason to be a little on the patient side. The biggest thing that kind of influenced me, because I originally felt when I read this thing a couple of days ago, just read that, what's the problem? It just said there, it's the end of First Street. It's whenever there's a property that's adjacent to the other zone, it's very easy to see it one way or the other. Should it be HDR? Should it be commercial or central business district? So, those are questions, but the more I thought about it, especially 16255, but the thing that really weighed on me here as the more I thought about this was that, we keep talking about the parking, but then in the last year or two, the town has kind of brought on this whole parking problem. We've limited it, we've done these things, we've had a parking study that actually said there's quite a bit of parking. So, to bring the parking up is important, but it's, we've argued it both ways, and then we've also have, through some of our policies, we've actually, continued to make the parking a bigger issue and a bigger problem. And we haven't really solved it. So then you have a person come doing, a basic rezone, and that great big elephant parking becomes a great big issue. That really shouldn't be. It should be a very clear cut. Is it changed the zoning or not zoning? Does it qualify per the code or not qualify per the code? So these are the things that I've sat here all day kind of thinking about. And the final really thing for me is that, as we all know, Ron has done a great job and has come to the town and is a very integral part of our town. But we have continuously had, some long-range plans, some concepts, some real total redevelopment of that whole downtown area, that entire square block. So my final thought, not really to do with the code or anything like 16255, but I really feel that this lot, the parking, all those issues ought to be brought, if we were going to do a rezone or redevelopment, all those things, we actually should wait, see what kind of redevelopment we do for that entire square block. The huge dream that Ron has and the town has, that idea. So that's when it should come together. So I certainly feel, because of our code and because of the requirements, and also which I mentioned at the very beginning, under the housing, HDR, high density residential, you could have up to a 10-unit development. And I would argue that the town needs 10 dwelling units, way more than it needs 10 parking spaces or 30 parking spaces. So that's the way I feel about it.
Okay.
Thank you for your patience.
Okay. Jim?
Okay. The first thing I wanted to say here is that it does not seem like Ron has the support of the local residents that abut this property. There wasn't anyone who lived in that area that said, hey, this seems like a great idea to me. And I think residents' concerns, especially longtime residents who expected the use to be a certain way, are very important to consider. The other thing was, even though we've kind of talked about some ways we could kind of restrict the use of that, I think that gets into a pretty slippery slope where if we change this, but then try to dictate exactly how the land is going to be used, I mean, I don't know how enforceable that ends up being, maybe in 5 or 10 years, when maybe none of us are on this group, maybe we've got a turnover of town staff. We've certainly heard in the past how there was at least negotiations made that didn't come to fruition. And as was pointed out right in the packet, under additional considerations, Ron is not bound by us. He is, telling us, yep, I'm going to use it this way. He could change his mind, just like he said earlier. I changed my mind. The main thing that I have an issue with is this is, the 2017 housing study said we were short about 140 units in our town, housing units. We are short. Right? I was on me and Linda were on the parking subcommittee, and we identified over 20 possible parcels in town that could be used for parking, to include 2 owned by the town that I thought were pretty easy, possible developed ones that the town had within their control to develop to get as much as 160 additional parking spots. Now, they're not right up against the central business district like this would be. But again, when we're considering zoning, I don't know that use is something that we, the use of parking or whatever this need is something that we want to put a lot of, emphasis on, especially as I'm looking at the zoning map. This was the last undeveloped lot of this size that is zoned for high-density residential. I'm going to echo what Ron said, or what Roger said, and said that if we could get 10 additional units on there, an apartment complex or duplexes or triplexes or whatever it was in a future development, that would be much more beneficial to the community when we still have so many other opportunities for parking in town, even though they haven't been developed. It says right under analysis here, Nederland Municipal Code 16255 states the following: for the purpose of establishing sound, stable, and desirable development within the town, the rezoning of land is to be discouraged. Rezoning should only be considered, and then it talked about the different things. Does meet a need for parking, but it takes away what I think is a greater need for high-density residential units to possibly be built there. And as Ron has said, he may not continuously own this. There might be somebody down the line who would be willing to build on that the way that would benefit the town the most. So at this time, I can't support this either. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Without belaboring the point or going over what others have said, the first part of 16-255 says the land to be rezoned was zoned in error and is presently zoned is inconsistent with the policies and goals of the comprehensive plan. And I don't see that as being the case. I'm not convinced that is the case. Therefore, in my view, the rezoning should not happen. However, I think it could be considered if we saw a more compelling argument for how the rezone might help the town. So for example, if this thing was thought through a little bit more, or as Roger said, it was part of the bigger picture, then I think consideration might, might fit better into the policies and goals of the comprehensive plan. So at this point, even though I did go to great lengths to try to find out what other options we had, because I think it was only fair to explore those, it seems that the consensus that I've heard about everybody say is that perhaps now is not the right time to do this, nor is it the correct thing at this point. So I don't think I can support it either. And I think that sums it up. So at this point, Miranda, I will put it out to the planning commission to see if anyone wants to make a motion, and then we can take a vote.
Yep, and I do just want to point out that on the last page of your reading, there's proposed language for how you can make that motion.
Okay.
I can do that. I will, I move to recommend, let me try this one more time. I move not to recommend approval to the board of trustees of the rezone of application for the Nederland Community Business District NCBDR LLC at this time.
Okay, so let's clarify. So a yes vote.
Second.
Okay.
I think we got a second.
I might need to find out from the attorney if I phrase that right.
Well, I think, and so would it be okay if I help? I think you're recommending denial of the
Thank you.
application.
Yes, let me try that again. I recommend denial of this.
Of approving this application.
Approving this application.
To the board of trustees.
So therefore, a yes vote means no.
Right, so if you're saying yes, you also agree with denying recommending approval of this application.
Just make sure everyone's clear. Okay, and Roger seconded?
Seconded.
Okay.
Okay.
Miranda, will you take the vote, please?
Chair Williams.
Yes. Yes.
Vice Chair Reese,
Yes.
Commissioner Cornell,
Yes, not to recommend.
Commissioner Duggan,
Yes.
Commissioner Dye,
Yes.
Commissioner Glasser,
Yes.
Commissioner Herring,
Yes.
Commissioner Rivera.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you for
Thank you
sir,
for
and
listening.
showing up and providing
We're
information.
very happy to have you. We told Mr. Mitchell that 6 years ago, so thank you. Thanks
All right.
for-
Thank you. Thank you. All right, so let's see, but let's move on to our second. Yeah, our second action item, which is our annual tradition of appointment of a chairperson and vice chair. So Miranda, I guess I will just ask you to do a brief introduction on this, please.
Yes, it's that time of year. So per your bylaws, at the first meeting of the year, the planning commission must appoint to serve as a chairperson and to serve as a vice chairperson. Currently, your chairperson is Steve Williams and your vice chairperson is Jim Reese. Typically, appointments are done through nomination and then confirmed by the majority of the planning commission. A majority of the planning commission do have terms that will last through the year. However, I do want to note that Commissioner Glasser and Commissioner Herring do have terms that end in June 2023 or and I'm not sure if they're going to seek reappointment. So the question before you is who would you like to appoint as chair and vice chair?
So does that mean that Commissioner Herring and Glasser cannot run?
They could run, but then obviously if they didn't seek reappointment or were not reappointed by the board of
And we would
trustees,
do this again.
we would have a vacancy and then we would just again choose.
Okay. All right. Well, let's see. So we should proceed by, I guess I will start as chair and just say that I am willing to throw my hat in for maybe one more year. If so desired by everyone on the commission. And Jim, I'll let you speak as co-chair.
I also would be willing to continue in this position and serve the planning commission. I did not miss a meeting last year, and I take this very seriously. I do a lot of research and homework, and I really enjoy working with Steve. I think we make a good team. So if the rest of the planning commission felt that we would be good leadership, that's it.
I have a question.
You may ask questions, but I saw your little, I did miss a meeting and you didn't. So.
Miranda, or are we allowed to make this in one motion or want to do this?
You can do it in one motion if you'd like.
Well, I just want to see if there's anyone else interested before we do that.
Mr. Chair, can I make a motion?
You may now make a motion.
It's actually been my privilege to work with you too. Steve has been a great chairperson. He has the right middle ground, can work with the public hearings very well. So his personality is very good for being a chairperson. And Jim, you've been a wonderful vice chair. You filled in several times with the meetings, done a great job. So it's a pleasure to actually nominate Steve Williams and Jim Reese as chair and vice chair of the Planning Commission.
A second.
Okay, I guess we take a vote.
Yeah, Commissioner Rivera,
Yes.
Commissioner Herring,
Yes.
Commissioner Glasser,
Yes.
Commissioner Dye,
Yes.
Commissioner Duggan,
Yes.
Commissioner Cornell,
Yes.
Vice Chair Reese,
Abstain.
Chair Williams.
Abstain. I don't think we have to, actually.
Or, no, it's
Good point. And then we go on record as something bad happened. See, it was your fault.
Thank you
All
for
right.
volunteering again.
And
Yeah.
thank you,
Thank
everyone for your support. Okay, that wraps up the action items. Should we take a short break before we move on to discussion items? How do people feel? We already had one. I'll take another short 3-minute break.
Sure.
And then we'll wrap this up. Okay, let's do it. Wait till you have us turned on. Thank you. Okay. All right, let's move on with our discussion items.
So you had a bylaw interaction.
The first one is on the fence code, and Miranda, if you'd be so kind as to introduce the fence code. Discussion.
Yes, so the Board of Trustees has requested the Planning Commission review the fence code and offer some recommendations for ways in which it can be revised to clear it up, really to address the ambiguity and inconsistency in the code. So I just want to bring forward like why this came before you. Maybe a little. Can you hear me? You're good? Okay. Concerns with the fence code were identified during a Board of Zoning adjustment hearing where there were two variances for a fence related to fence height and also how the fence height is measured. So I'm just going to take, these are just two highlighted issues, but we're obviously talking about fence code as a whole. So first thing, fence height. Currently in Nederland Municipal Code 1689 A and B, fence height is limited to 6 feet unless it is constructed or erected for only the purpose of screening illegally existing junkyards, outdoor storage yards, or other legally existing uses involving outdoor storage of machinery, equipment, materials, and automobiles. In those situations, the fence can be built to 8 feet. If someone wants to build their fence higher than 6 feet and they don't meet that criteria, they would have to seek a variance before the Board of Zoning Adjustment. The International Residential Code, however, allows someone to build their fence to 7 feet without a permit. And so we are not sure why town became more restrictive. And so we are recommending aligning town municipal code with the International Residential Code and allowing 7 feet for fences, and then anything above that needing a variance unless it meets that specific language regarding what it is concealing. So that's kind of part one, fence height. And then becomes the measurement of fence height. The way in which 1689G reads is that a fence height shall be measured from grade to the top of the highest point of the fence. Grade shall be determined on that portion of the property on which each portion of the fence is to be constructed or erected, as that grade exists at the date of the ordinance codified herein, or as such grade exists on the date of the permit for construction is applied for, whichever grade is lower. What we identified is if you have a property where the grade is kind of different on both sides, say the east side is lower than the west side, your fence is going to be higher on the east side than it is on the west side because of a grade difference. And if someone is to change the grade on one side, where do you measure from? As staff, we haven't offered a recommendation. We're really looking for some feedback and insight from the Planning Commission on where you feel like the appropriate side is to, where do you measure it from? Are you measuring it from the highest grade or the lowest grade? And that's something to clear up. And then just generally, as you read fence code, are there other things you see that are worth changing?
Okay, thank you.
Can I just jump in and say
Yes.
something really quick?
Please.
And that is that, just so you all know, the International Residential Code could also be amended to be consistent with the town zoning code related to fencing. So that if you wanted to keep the 6-foot fence and you wanted to create consistency between the International Residential Code and the zoning code of 6 feet, there is a process for putting an amendment in place to the International Residential Code so that it's 6 feet. Does that make sense?
An amendment to the international.
Really?
Right, because the town adopts the IRC, the International Residential Code, adopts the building codes. They adopt them by reference.
Right.
And so the town has adopted these codes, and there are amendments to those building codes that the town decides we want to change this thing to be consistent with the zoning code in this area. So that is permissible to amend, when you adopt it by reference, it's permissible to amend a section and create a more restrictive requirement. It's in our code, it's in chapter 18 where those amendments are laid out.
So what's the difference between amending the code or the International Building Code versus amending our municipal code?
Well, there is no difference. I was just suggesting that that's another way to go about doing it, to say that you don't have to stick with the 7 feet height. You can choose what height you want to have fences be set at, and just make sure that the two are consistent, so there isn't advice given to property owners saying you can build to 7 feet when the zoning code says you can only build to 6. But you don't have to stay to the 7 feet.
Attorney Ramsey, can you correct me if I'm wrong, though, that if they, the planning commission were gonna go like higher, say, example, you've got 8 feet, they would still need a building permit, because technically IRC says you're only exempt from having a building permit up to 7 feet. So I don't think we can remove that part of the code, right?
You can't.
Exemption from a building permit?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Roger?
I don't see what's wrong with 6 feet. I think we've always had 6 feet. So yeah, well, whose jurisdiction is it? The board of trustees would change it, or?
But they're looking for a recommendation from the planning commission. So a little why this came forward is unfortunately staff did give inaccurate information to an applicant that said that they could go upwards to 7 feet without a permit, because that is how IRC reads. But our code is more restrictive, limited them to 6 feet. And I think there were some board of trustee members who really don't understand why we would be more restrictive than 7 feet and sticking with the consistency of IRC, that made more sense to align with that. And we actually do have Mayor Billy on, who has some experience with this, and whether you want to allow him to speak at this time or during public comment, he did have some insight into this.
Okay. Well, it's a discussion item, so I don't think we go through the same process.
No, yeah.
So if is Mayor Billy on?
Hey, everybody, can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Cool, thanks.
Give us your wisdom.
Thanks. So I work for ResNet, and better for worse, I do have we do work with ICC pretty directly, generally with IECC, the portion of ICC that deals with energy, the International Energy Conservation Code. But the ICC process is one where they they create model codes that can be used nationally and internationally, and how it has been done until recently, how 2018 would have been done was like a big, many people show up for this big conference and they all give their different reasons for why they want something in there. And, that would include, in this case, contractors, code officials, fence product manufacturers, all kinds of stakeholders would be there making their case for, whatever that component of the building is, in this case, fence height. So I don't know, and what I can do, depending on how much you guys decide to dig into this, I can reach out to ICC and get a better sense of how they ever landed at 7 feet. But to answer what Jennifer was saying earlier is true. Like, these are really model codes that are created kind of to be, code that would, apply throughout the country. So obviously in different places of the country, people have other needs. So it is very normal. And actually this 2018 code has amendments that we put into it before it went into effect last January. And it is pretty normal for states or municipalities or, code jurisdictions to amend something to say, yeah, we like almost all of this code, but there's a few things we want a little different. So we're going to tweak it here and there. And that is actually what we ended up doing to a small degree on a few things last year, if I'm not mistaken, and that is pretty normal practice. My take on it is just watching what happened with the whole Little Bear thing. Ultimately, I don't really care. I'm a short guy. I can't see over any of those fences, so it doesn't matter to me. But like, if one number, I think would really help. And I think, the NMC, our code has two, has a 6 foot and then 8 foot for certain other special reasons. But I think whatever, it'd be interesting to learn, and I can dig into that if you want, what the logic was that got them to 7 feet on the international code. But for us, I think it's not, and Roger, I appreciate your knowledge of the history, but because we've always had it that way, to me isn't a sound reason. Like, I'd like to have some reasons about why we do it versus just a number. And if, it might be there's a great reason. And 6, I'm not, by no means a 6, I have no problem with it being 6 feet. Just if you come up with a good reason for it, I think that'd be better. And, or whether you move to a different height. And I think the main thing would be to just have only one height. I think if you still wanted to have the special cases up to 8 feet, that's one thing, as long as it's super clear what those special cases are. But getting rid of the differences between the NMC and the ICC, so that this doesn't happen again to someone else in the future. I think that's my main thing. I would love to see just one number, and ultimately, if you land on a number with some good logic behind it versus just because we've always done it, or because this is what ICC says, or whatever. But whether it's looking at other similar towns, or mountains, or just coming up with the logic, or remembering or finding out what the logic was that landed us at 6 feet in the first place. So those are my main comments. The ICC is a model code. It's again, it can be amended or you can use it, but ultimately I think whatever we do, if we could just have one number out there, so that person in town who wants to build something, or a town employee who's giving the people advice, they're just all going to land on one number and not have this confusion like it happened in Little Bear.
Yep, go ahead, Roger.
Yeah, I don't even raise my head because I wasn't quite done. I said, well, the mayor was on. I can give you an answer there, Mayor Billy.
Thanks, Roger.
89% of all the fences in the United States are 6 feet high. And the reason why they're 6 feet high, because 94.78 people that are under their height that cannot see over the top, just as you cannot see over the top. So that's why they're 6 feet high. And that's how they came up with that.
But you're saying, what was the first part you said? You said that the majority of places go with 6 feet. Is that what you said? Was that?
Yes. I gave you a number. That was just BS, but.
Okay, yeah, I kind of sounded like BS. I just wanted to make sure.
But the vast majority. I mean, that's what. So here's one thing that we should. I think one thing. It would be a very fun exercise. It's one page for just a couple of people to get together and make some recommendations.
I think that'd be worthwhile personally. And again, I could dig into why ICC came up with their number. But personally, I feel like if this is something you guys felt was worth it, a little subcommittee work and digging deeper might be worth the time later.
But those 2 points I just made, I believe that's probably a huge part of it.
I wonder if it could be wind. Does wind play a factor?
Could be those things too.
We get some wind up here.
Yeah, that's super logical. Yeah.
I mean, there's also the aesthetics of out of town, and fences becoming more prominent of what you're seeing, as opposed to the houses, the homes themselves being able to have a sight line. I mean, I understand this is a maximum. Not everybody's going to build up to that height, but to me, that's an aspect of it.
I agree. That's exactly what it is, and that's why I said that. The vast majority of people
maybe a dog can't jump more than 6 feet.
can't do that, but you can't see over. But yeah, it's not intrusive to the horizon.
Right.
But
If you look at
it's above your eye.
these subdivisions down below, and you just see a sea of fences.
I think most cases around here, when people want to build a 7-foot fence, like in the case of Little Bear, it's because you're right up next to the highway. And so that's the most reasonable thing in the world, I think, to have a big noise barrier fence. I don't think most people in like the middle of a residential area like Old Town are going to want to put 7-foot fences up, unless they have a velociraptor or something.
Or a deer that's trying to get into.
Yeah. So yeah, I think in most cases people want a 7-foot fence for a good reason, like a noise barrier or something like that.
But I don't see why going to the BZA, for example, is an issue then. I mean, you have a good reason if you wanted a 7-foot, do that.
Can I just ask the town staff, I didn't quite hear if you said it, I missed it. Is this a recommendation that you guys are making for simplicity for our own town code going forward?
We are recommending going to 7 feet.
Okay.
Just to align, and our reasoning though is to align with the International Residential Code so that we have documents matching, because this document that is in your packet, this exemption, I can't change that. To Attorney Madsen's point, we can then change our code, but this document is out there, and so it does create some challenges. And the discretion is there for someone to choose to build upwards to 7 feet or not, but it would give them the option to do so.
So I'm going to suggest that a subcommittee and digging is probably overkill for what does not seem to be, I don't see anybody here in the public railing against us possibly changing this or recommending changing this to 7 feet. And I haven't heard a good argument why we don't go with the staff's recommendation.
I agree there. You could also frame it like under what conditions, if we were to restrict it to 6 feet, under what conditions would a 7-foot fence not be approved for a permit? I can't imagine the Board of Zoning Adjustment saying no. So it's a really good reason. But yeah, I think it should be in line with
I had a question about the IRC in general. You're referencing it as those documents that building construction, it's common knowledge, it's what people mostly reference out there, but it's not in our code. It's not like we bring part of the existing IRC into our code already, right?
We reference in Chapter 18 adoption of the IRC. So we have adopted the 2018 IRC, and then some of our amendments are related to fire resistant siding and HERS ratings for new residences. That's the only amendment we opted to make.
So, and when was that done?
And October 2021 is when the 2018 building codes were adopted and went into effect January 2022.
And it took you everything that's in the 2018 IRC?
Correct.
Except those 3 amendments that she.
Those are modifications, and really those are addition to. We didn't remove anything.
Was there a gap analysis done of what our code conflicted with what was in there?
There were some areas where our building official had offered recommendations. Unfortunately, the fence did not come up under this. And we identified this discrepancy when the applicant was operating off of that document showing what was exempted from a permit.
How much work do you think it would take to do a gap analysis of what it would maybe be out of alignment? Because the only reason why I say that is if we're gonna consider one thing like 6-7 feet of a fence, no big deal. But if we're saying wholesale, we're gonna go ahead and adopt this, but we have all of these other prior things that were put into the code throughout history of what defined our town, and there's 40 things, that's a little different. That's something that maybe we do need a subcommittee for, I think.
It might be something, so the town contracts with Safe Builds to issue building permits and to be the building inspector. Safe Build might have more information if there's any inconsistency. I would suspect there's not a lot of other inconsistencies. I mean, this is something that when the fence code was adopted, somebody should have thought to reference the residential code and didn't, and it's an oversight.
Now, we do have intentions to bring before the Planning Commission and Board of Trustees some amendments to our code, built 2018 building code. We did identify the wind load didn't get caught. There's a couple of things that need to be amended. So I'd be happy to ask our building official if he can look and see if there are any other, he would be the best to know, what comes up, what stands out to him as potentially discrepancy between the two.
I think for me, it seems like that may be the more prudent thing if we're want to align our codes anyway, to check that, compare, and then say, okay, we'll either wholesale, agree, fine, let's just get in alignment with IRC because it's only 5 things, or let's have a discussion, let's see if this is going to change the look of our town, or how things are going to get built. than what everybody would be comfortable with. I don't know. That's take on it.
And maybe Mayor Billy, you could, maybe find out a little bit more from, from the larger picture. That would be helpful.
Yeah, okay, I'll do that. Honestly, I was surprised that it was even in the international code, but it is. So yeah, I can research and see if I can get some information on how that number landed. It could be as simple as fence manufacturers wanted to sell an 8-foot fence and have people cut it down because they'd make more money than a 6-foot fence. Which, believe me, has a lot of sway in how some of those things are decided in the long run. But I'll find out and I can get back to you.
There was that TV show, the guy in the backyard, he couldn't look over a 7-foot. Maybe you guys could just look into the one on the slope too. Yeah, as you know, I was on that, but I mean, that was what, so if you just have a slope coming down like that far, and this is your property line, and you build your fence there, 6-foot fence, this person here is gonna say it's an 8-foot fence. So that's what happened, except for what it was, because I know that property very well. I used to snowplow it, and I actually ran my truck over that hill several times and got stuck. So I know exactly about how between the apartment complex, I put it in the root and pine. So he just did his surface like this, and then, so it was, and that way he had a foundation there. So he built his fence on his property at 6 feet. So 6 inches over, 4 inches over, it's the 7, whatever it was, plus fence. So I think that was actually where, the issue was, but, unless they can come up with another reason, I say, well, that was a 6-foot fence. That's where it was built on his property. Its foundation is right there. And so, I think that's the way you'd have to measure.
But if it's on a slope, I mean, it's a 6-foot fence, no matter how you look at it. If the piece
Well, I agree. That was the example. So it became an issue because it went like that.
But it's still a 6-foot fence, right?
So
one side is an 8-foot, one side is a 6-foot.
Yeah, in that example, you had a dramatic grade drop, so it was 6 foot on kind of the applicant side, but over 6 feet on the other side because they came down.
Because it's like on a retaining wall?
Yes.
Yeah, it comes down below that.
That makes sense.
So yes, and everything on this side is the driveway. And
Yeah, that makes sense.
so,
But so you're saying it should be measured 6 feet from the property owner's side?
yeah,
I think it should be measured from the side of either the neighbor or public view.
well, I'm saying that, we ought to look to see, there's probably, if we're going into this, there's probably some examples that would do it.
Right.
But that's how, I'm just, number one, it just explains, what happened in the discrepancy.
Right.
So you're suggesting that if it's on top of a retaining wall or something, the measurement starts at the bottom of that retaining wall or the bottom?
So say at Little Bear, Dennis's property there, say that whole property instead of below grade of the highway was above, like 2 or 4 feet above the highway. And then on top of that grade was a 7-foot fence. If you're standing on the highway, right next to the fence, that's a 11-foot fence. But on the other side, it's 7 feet.
Yeah, you have to.
And I would say like our concern for why this matters is not because of person on the inside of that property line, but for the aesthetic and functional aspect on the outside.
That kind of gets to Chris's comment.
Yeah, those cases, right, exactly. So on the highway side, it was actually the exact opposite, so it wasn't the highways. That one was not it, and that was part of the vision clearance, because it was way down in a hole.
Right, so that's his
Yeah.
problem. He wants the highest fence possible because a 6-foot fence for him is only 4 feet,
Exactly.
which is not
It
functional.
was between
Below
the
the highway.
neighbors. Oh, yeah.
But this is not an item we're voting on. Tonight, this is just discussion, and we still have another item, the 3-mile plan that we have.
I guess I do wonder, and we didn't put it in here, but is there a planning commissioner or two interested in working with staff? And it sounds like Safe Build and Mayor Billy on fence code. I don't think the subcommittee would take a long time. Are you volunteering? Commissioner Duggan?
No, I was just wondering, like, if there's,
That's what I'm saying.
like, to me, there's like, with the stroke of a pen, effectively, we can align our code with the IRC code and just simplify everything. Less work for the staff on building permits. It just seems like a win-win situation that we don't even have to like discuss, really. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I agree, but I think we have to identify what that change would look like,
Right.
which meetings we gotta go through. So.
In terms of
IRC.
In terms of
The
the
differences.
No, I'm saying as it pertains to the fence, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I'm saying as it pertains to the fence aspect specifically, because that's what we're talking about. But I understand that there might be 4 or 5 or 10 other differences when it comes to like blanket adopting that whole code, copy and paste,
And maybe it's some committees, some people help with that.
I think if we're gonna amend the ordinance, we're gonna wanna hit everything.
Gotcha.
To make sure we're, because otherwise we're gonna do it twice, I think.
Yeah.
And get safe build involved too.
I mean, I don't know the code that well, but I can help. I would often help pair with others. As somebody who does know the code really well, could just help identify what things. So I'd be willing to help on something.
But if there's some pressing issue regarding fences that we can just take care of almost now.
There
I'm
is,
saying even if we have to like do it twice, could we do it once with a fence and then once in a blanket way? Like, it's not that much work, right?
so, well, the planning commission doesn't have full authority to do that, so we bring it before the board, and I would,
Correct, I understand.
I don't know if Mayor Billy, my assumption would be Mayor Billy looking for it to be a complete ordinance with all changes. And there is nothing current where this is coming as kind of post the board of zoning adjustment and all these fence variants.
So, and I'm sorry, so why are we even talking about the fences? Well, specifically, if we can't, if we're also saying that we're not gonna make any change unless it'll.
So the board of trustees that act after 2 variance applications went before the BZA related to fences, felt like we needed to look at the fence code and amend it.
That makes sense.
And so that's why it's kind of a post-event discussion. So there isn't any urgency, I would say, and we have time to do a further review. But the board of trustees felt like that was not, I think for some, they didn't feel like that was an appropriate reason to seek a variance, that this is something that could be handled under a code change.
Yeah.
And to eliminate inconsistencies or through the code, right? So it's.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm just saying if there's a pressing issue with fences, I feel like we can just wrap that up quick.
Yes, the variances were approved, so
Yeah.
the property stopped the variances, didn't receive approval on both circumstances. It's just this became a topic of interest to the board of trustees of like, do we have a larger code change we need to evaluate? And wanted the planning commission to weigh in on that.
So do we need to come to a consensus as a planning commission on recommendations? Is that what you're looking for tonight?
No, I mean, I think it was just an initial discussion. I think if Commissioner Rivera is open to working with staff and Mayor Billy and our building official, then we come back to you at a very near meeting with our official ordinance change recommendation for your review that then goes
We
to the.
review that and then send it to the board. I think that's the way.
And I don't see us needing more than like a month or 2 to be able to come back. That like, I think like we'll bring it back next month. It's a very small section of code.
Fences, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's not just fences, though. We look at other building.
If you want to take a building code as a whole, that will take us a little bit longer.
Yeah. Well, I guess we'd have to
start with
discuss that.
Fences.
So,
The low-hanging fruit. So I will say that when we discussed this in the planning commission meeting yesterday, we would discuss this, what side of the property line to measure from. And I will say that Commissioner Duggan gave great reason why I would support or recommend that we measure from the public facing or the neighbor side of the fence for the reason that he stated. That makes total sense.
The subcommittee will take that into consideration.
Chair Williams, you do have individuals online who are interested in giving public comment and potentially in the room.
Let's go.
Yes. So I know Kathleen Chabai has her hand raised and she's interested in giving comment on the fence code.
Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes. Can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. I can't even believe this is on the agenda. The only inconsistency in the fence code that I see comes from staff's inconsistent enforcement and inconsistent interpretation. This subject matter, specifically with the Little Bear people, Dennis and Ellen, was brought to my attention by the owner of the Knotted Root, who wanted my opinion because he believed, after talking to town staff, that Dennis and Ellen were violating the town code. I was extremely troubled because town staff told the Knotted Root that they had the right to build an 8-foot fence without a permit per 16-89B, but that Dennis and Ellen did not. Because of this unconstitutional decision by town staff, Knotted Root felt that Dennis and Ellen were violating the code if they put a fence over 6 feet. And the town insisted the height start at the grade 2 feet below the entire rest of Dennis and Ellen's lot, that the town required they raise for drainage in their structural building permit requirements, which would have made their fence on their side 4 feet tall. Also, town staff initially okayed the 7-foot fence, emailed it to Dennis and Ellen, the International Building Code language, and changed their mind after it was constructed based on complaints from Knotted Root because town staff told Knotted Root a different interpretation of the fence language. I have no idea why staff decided to deny rights of Dennis and Ellen and force them into a BZA variance hearing, or why staff said 16-89B could not or did not apply to Dennis or Ellen, but did apply to Knotted Root. I support raising the 6-foot fence height option to 7 and keeping the 8-foot option in Section B as it is. Per the AIM quote, the issue that arose in November is where the fence height should be measured if the grade is different on one side of the fence or the other. The actual language says, grade shall be determined on that portion of the property on which each property of the fence is to be constructed or erected, as said grade exists on the date of the ordinance codified herein, or as such grade exists on the date of the permit for construction is applied for, whichever is lower. In my opinion, the town should get rid of the language that says the grade shall be determined as said grade exists on the date of the ordinance, which you all agree has been in place for decades. Get rid of that and edit it to grade shall be determined as such grade exists on the date a permit for construction is applied for. And then maybe add some language based on the grade of the majority of the property to address the situation that happened to Ellen and Dennis, which was the town required them to raise the grade of literally 99% of their property, okay? And then wanted to base their fence level 2 feet below that. It made no sense. So, and from my understanding, the town required the building project on the property to raise the grade for most of the property because of drainage. That's definitely sensible. The fence grade should be from whatever the grade the town requires of a specific structural build or land and or at the time of the application, the grade at the time. But more importantly, I think the Planning Commission should recommend any and all variance fees that were wrongfully imposed on Dennis and Ellen be returned, since per the code, they had every right to build a fence up to 8 feet without a permit, just like Miranda told Knotted Root they could. Okay, thank you.
Well, we're not dealing with that situation. We want to fix the code, so what the points you raised are good ones because it illustrates why we need to fix this. Thank you.
Well, town needs to stop okaying something and then changing their mind later.
Okay, yes, thank you. Okay, so shall we proceed with a small
I
substitute?
don't know if you have any public comment.
Oh, we have another one?
I don't know. I just wanted to open it up
Okay.
to the room if there was.
I think we're interested in the 3 miles.
Okay. All right, so we all clear?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Proceed and, okay. And there's no reason for Jennifer to be included other than you'll see changes from the committee.
I don't need to be a part of the committee, but I will work on
That's,
drafting the ordinance, once you guys put your comments in place and give your direction.
okay, thank you. Okay, anything else, Miranda, on that? All right, well, let's move on to the infamous 3 mile.
Thank you,
plan.
guys. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Okay, what I'd like to do is, Miranda, do a brief introduction on the 3 mile plan, what it is, and then perhaps Attorney Madsen can add anything to it. And then I've asked Roger to add a little bit of history to the 3 mile plan and why it's important. So why don't we go there?
So I guess I'll just take it back first to the Board of Trustees working on an annexation ordinance, which they did adopt in December. They adopted annexation, or the ordinance 834, which repealed and replaced chapter 15 of the Netherlands Municipal Code, which addresses annexation. So under state legislature, for annexation law, there you cannot annex anything beyond 3 miles. And so municipalities in Colorado are required to prepare and adopt a 3 mile plan prior to annexing property. 3 mile plan is a long range plan that outlines where municipalities intend to annex property and describes how they will ensure the adequate provisions of service within the newly annexed territory and the remainder of the existing municipality. The Board of Trustees does intend to do a town hall specific to annexation, and they're aiming to do that in March. So tonight's discussion really isn't about the annexation ordinance. It's specific to the 3 mile plan. And that is a request that was brought forward by Commissioner Cornell. And then of course, I'll turn it to Attorney Madsen to provide even more information on 3 mile plans.
So if we were to do a 3 mile plan, it would become part of the ordinance, do you think? No, totally separate. Yes.
Right, it's a separate plan. It's like your comp plan or transportation plan. It is separate. It can be, you can use your comp plan if your comp plan does address the 3 miles outside of your jurisdiction. You can say that the comp plan represents your 3 mile plan. Municipalities are supposed to do this every year. So if you adopt a comp plan, say in 2023, what do you do in 2024? Well, in 2024, you could say, well, our comp plan is our 3 mile plan, and you can make updates to it. It is important that it's done before an annexation ordinance is approved by the Board of Trustees. There have been circumstances where a municipality doesn't have a 3 mile plan in place, and they hurry and rush and get a plan in place when an annexation petition is submitted. And the reason that it's important is that there is some forethought to how are we going to service this area and what's the plan going to look like? What's the land use going to look like? So those are some additional thoughts. And I don't know, Roger probably knows better if you do have it. I assume you don't have a 3 mile plan, but maybe Roger knows.
Yeah.
Does our current comp plan address,
No, it does not. That's what I was gonna.
not in a way that would satisfy the state?
Doesn't have any.
Yeah, it's not in there at all.
So just, yeah, it's not because of the time, I want to be real brief, right? Which is hard for me to do, I guess, but see how good I can do. I was gonna do a little bit about, talk about, we have had annexations, we, the Mud Lake was a huge one that, a lot of people don't even really know about, but that was like about 1999. Then we also, the Caribou Ridge, which is farther out there, that was an annexation. But the biggest thing is for the 3 mile plan, I actually went at the 87 comp plan, the 93 comp plan, 2003. Well, not the, yeah, the 2003 one also had a 3-mile plan in it. It's very, pretty scattered, but points out the areas where they thought should be development and those things. The 2013 update, which was our most recent one, when we're under it, if you went to it, it has like future land use map and service plan. And it's really showing the areas within town limits and where they thought, development and how the things should go. So in our comp plan right now, theoretically, if someone, looking for out and about, I would say that we don't have a 3-mile plan. And the plan that we have there actually shows for development in the town. And so, when this all kind of came, when we started working on the ordinance, I saw that, we're gonna redo the ordinance, which I think actually was, some people actually felt like it. What are we doing? Well, the old ordinance really wasn't very substantial. I think we have a better ordinance now than we did 6 months ago. It's a step in the right direction. My final thing I really want to say then is that 2 things. The whole idea of annexation is just huge, and it causes a lot of turmoil and a lot of misrepresentation, and I've gone through some of it. Steve, yes, we have actually gone through some applications. And to have a plan and to actually, for the town, the residents, for everybody to know, it's just so important, and it just takes away a whole lot of articles, the editor and all this. And we had that just even when the last board was trying to just decide, what to do about the IGA with the county. And talking about, we had 2 different ones where we're talking about property on Ridge Road. Next thing you know, everybody's on the phone calling in, what's going on in Ridge Road? They're gonna annex all the way to the dam. That's basically what people are gonna say. And then when a little discussion about up Caribou Road. And we finally did have a pretty good community meeting, but in between all that, it just becomes, it's very disruptive. And the 3-mile plan gives us a chance to work on these things, to talk about projects. And it's not just which land, it's the water, sewer, it's all the infrastructure, it's all these things that needs to be done. So then when someone does apply, you're not just caught, what the heck's going on? And I guess from that email that he sent, that saying that we're actually under the super IG for it, till October, I believe, gives us a perfect time and a chance to actually maybe work on this, and that's what the board of trustees want. But I think we've always done it, and because of the super IGA, I think we got away from it, and the last comp plan was just all about different things, and there was a lot of different reasons, but I guess at the time when we actually had, so the reason why we never did it is because at the time of the IGA, that board, and a lot of us didn't even know. I know I was on the planning commission, and I wasn't even aware of this, that, oh yeah, besides the IGA, that was the town's chance to actually do a 3-mile plan and tell the community, or the county, and to work together and say, yes, we're interested in this parcel, that parcel, this parcel, and we're interested in those. We should have done that in 2000. Then when Kayla would have came and talked about bringing that thing, it took the county 5 minutes, like, well, it's not in the plan, see you later, see you in 10 years. So that's kind of what, in a very short term, what happened to Kayla. And I think there's probably much more, but the fact that the town didn't even incorporate it into a plan, and then here they come along Main Run, you know, it was just an easy thing for the county to say, sorry, I don't see it, and say goodbye. And it happened to the property just at Ridge Road, just north of town too, where Ursula tried to annex that. And the exact same thing happened. It wasn't in the IGA, and so see you later. So that's why the plan is very important for everybody on all sides of the issue to know where the town is going. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Thank you. So are we, is there a legal requirement for us to have a 3-mile plan?
There is a legal requirement before you were taking the next project. Before the Board of Trustees were to agree to an annexation ordinance, yes, you have to have a 3-mile plan.
So this needs to be discussed hand in hand, I guess.
Well, I think the point that Roger is making in terms of doing some pre-planning and some forethought as to areas that could potentially be annexed in the town, that is really important and does serve a purpose. Legally, though, it doesn't necessarily have to.
I understand. Okay, that makes sense. Question for staff, and we talked about this the other day, is this something that staff has to devote time to, or can we contract it out, or can we have DOLA do it, or how would we proceed?
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to research what services might be available to us. My assumption would be this is done with staff, our attorney. I don't know, Attorney Mass, if you know of any resources that DOLA provides, but I think it's done internally.
They might provide some, but it might, could be a grant or something like that.
Currently, we do not have funding available to contract, and so this is something we could look
It'd be a
into.
grant.
What financial resources are out there for us to be able to work on this?
DOLA might be, Department of Local Affairs, I think, has actually helped us in the past, too. I have no idea.
Well, they have issued like kind of the 2-pager that we put in the packet.
Right.
And so I just didn't have a chance to reach out to them today, but it's definitely worth consideration. I'm sure that they have experts available to assist us with it.
So the goal tonight was more to acquaint the planning commission, I think, with the need of what a 3-mile plan is and what the need is, and perhaps get some feedback as to perhaps how we should proceed and who's, so I guess it's a good point to, if anyone wants to speak.
Susan Wagner. Right. First thing I just want to point out, Mr. Cornell, that it was not quite accurate. Kayla, the county did not reject. The county asked her for more information. So one of my concerns is the conflict between the comprehensive plan, which, as you say, calls for development inside the town, and that was made very consciously. And Kayla did go through it, and I've read all the documents on the county website. They're all in there. There are lots of problems with that site. It's now expanded to 70 units. But I'm sure you're aware of them all. They talked about the county, the road wing.
It's not the issue.
No, I know, but you said that they told Kayla to come back in 10 years, and that's not true. They said,
Okay, yeah.
okay, and then the other thing is, when Mayor Larson in 2017, well, the first thing is, I'm concerned about the role of real estate developers here. Shouldn't even talk about K11. We should say, who's the Mountain Housing Assistance Trust, who's Michael Ackerman, who invested in that, and so on. But in any event, I'm concerned with our town leadership pursuing annexation that contradicts our comprehensive. And you clearly think there were mistakes made in the comprehensive plan, but then the comprehensive plan should be revised, and it hasn't been. So I have been continually perplexed by why our town leadership, the IGA, the purpose of it was to implement the comprehensive plans of the county and the town. And when Mayor Larson, first they put out this project, they wanted Nederland to go to the Bobcat Ridge, they wanted an outdoor department, they wanted a 5-mile radius where we could develop, and that was the real estate developer's idea. But Mayor, they first presented it in April 2017. Mayor Larson in September 2017 went to the county, the town administrator and the town lawyer. You were there. What Karen Gary did. Well, Karen Gary did was saying that the three of you did. But anyway, it's clear he wanted to get Kayla's property into the town, so they went through a whole IGA renegotiation. I'm just trying to say I would like to see more adherence to our comprehensive plan and to involve. And I did want to correct that I think it's wrong. There's been a lot of accusations to the county, and as a resident in unincorporated county, I really appreciate. I think they felt a good balance between development and conservation. So that's my.
Thank you, Susan. I think it also illustrates the need why we should have such a plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I just like to see the plan correspond.
You know, and eliminate a lot of this misunderstanding or misinformation.
Right, but the misinformation, where's that coming from? But in the 2030, I was in the 2030.
They want to be at the,
Oh,
since we have people online.
yeah, I participated in Vision 2030. And, you know, at a Chiquita Park meeting, which you were there, you know, when I expressed my opinion that I believe the community still wants this heat development inside the town boundaries, Kayla Evans just yelled out, I don't, and she was there with the mayor the whole time. Let's just say, I want more rule of law. I want more adherence. If we have a comprehensive plan, let's adhere to it. And if we're not going to adhere to it, then let's revise it. And so I think that's where a lot of the misunderstanding comes from, is we see, I still don't understand how Mayor Larson could go to the county and say Nederland has changed its position. You know, the town never informed any of us whose land was being considered for annexation. The county did. And we never had a public meeting. The board tends to put down as public meetings anytime something's on the agenda. We didn't have a true public meeting until the county was involved. And one of the first things the OK said was, well, in 2002, we were on the same page, and then Nederland changed its position. They wanted to expand outside the borders. And the people there said, well, what's Nederland? Who are you saying, Nederland? We never heard anything about changing our position. But the mayor was taking this position because that was his belief. So I'll just say, I think we can agree.
Yeah.
Our comp plan should mean something.
Right. And the comp plan is soon to be updated again. I mean, it's been 10 years, right?
Mhm.
So. So it is time. It is time to do that and the 3-mile plan, I feel. Anyone online want to speak? Oh, I'm sorry.
Me, Gerald, I'm a town resident. I just want to second what Susan said, and we worked together on Vision 2030. I spent probably hundreds of hours, including tabulating the results of the 60-odd surveys that were done online about what direction the people wanted to take, what they valued in the town. And there's been no change. That's why in the Chiquita Park and Vision 2030 meeting, we reiterated the 2020 goal, which is to develop from the inside out, to limit sprawl. And when I see the town spending so much time, and I support you for sitting through it, fighting over or discussing a fence or the impact of 2-acre CBD versus high-density residential, and you think about the impact, potential impact of not following our comprehensive plan and not having an IGA. I have a letter in the paper that's coming out tomorrow. I feel like in the last 5 to 8 years, the town has taken a new direction. Back in the day, we did take our comprehensive plan seriously. I totally agree that either we follow the plan, which is to say, our 3-mile plan is that there is no annexation. You know, we'll consider a project, I suppose. But I mean, think about it. If you want to designate, for example, the Eldora Valley and its annexation potential, what does that mean? You gotta have a road going through the national forest. I mean, you're talking about huge stuff. The places that were on the list that Chris Larson was negotiating for these annexations, Ridge Road you mentioned, South Beaver. I went into town hall, who wants it in South Beaver? Oh, a bunch of people. Well, where's your paper trail? Oh, we don't have one. Turned out there was one person that wanted it. So I just think that the idea of modeling our 3 mile plan on Dillon's 3 mile plan is like a knockdown punch in the boxing ring. If we want to model ourselves on a town, let's look at other towns that maintain their size, because that is what people want. What about hygiene? I went to grade school in hygiene. Except for some additions to the elementary school, hygiene has remained very nice. Property values are going up there. There's nothing wrong with having a beautifully managed, beautifully planned town that's more like a European town that's built from the inside out. I grew up in Boulder County. I've seen Boulder, Denver. Broomfield used to be a pony farm. Can we really do that up here? And all I can say is there's a lot of money floating around like right now. Like right next door to me, a lot of money, millions of dollars. These guys cannot wait.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. All right,
Just want to add a comment, though, that we're not considering modeling our 3 mile plan on Dillon's. That is only put in there as an example of what a 3 mile plan for a town could look like. There's nothing in there about us trying to conform to what that looks like. It was just an example.
That's a relief. Thank you.
And I think it's a great idea to look towards hygiene in other communities that have preserved themselves.
I have a quick comment. This is Mayor Billy.
Mayor Billy, go ahead.
It's just really a question, and Roger maybe can answer, or whoever. And I apologize, I didn't have a chance to read the packet because I've been busy tonight. But so my understanding of annexation, as I've come to understand more and more clearly over the last 2 years, is that someone from outside the town who is proximal to the town wants to come into the town, be more, be annexed into the town. And it's really more the decision of the annexee, if you will. But when you define the 3 mile plan, it sounds like it's more the town, maybe it's the town, working with the county, kind of planning out and talking about which of those lands they want to annex. Is that what I heard? Or can you describe that to me better? Because that's kind of how I heard it, was that a 3 mile plan is the town kind of deciding what they want to annex, which seems to contradict what I thought annexation was.
It is, Mayor Billy, you're correct. It is the town taking a look at its borders and the 3 miles around its borders and deciding, what properties may have a good potential for annexation. And if there are properties that have good potential for annexation, how those properties would be developed and what potential land uses you see. So it really is the municipality taking some time to think about, are there areas that we see that would be good areas to bring in the town, and how would the town service those areas?
But that doesn't mean it's going to happen.
It doesn't. It absolutely doesn't mean it's going to happen. It's just, it's an idea.
It's forward looking.
Yes.
Has that kind of historically led towns to go down that slippery slope of pressuring people to be annexed?
No, not necessarily. I mean, you do need the property that's annexed does need the approval of those property owners. I mean, not all owners need to approve, but at least 50% of the owners need to approve. So I don't know that it really leads to pressuring, but it could lead to discussions between the landowners and the municipality.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks for clarifying that.
I just wanted, for clarification purposes, from this town staff, and just to be sure that I'm understanding this correctly. So, as I remember looking at the IGA stuff previously, it has to be a property owner from outside the town to request annexation and go through all the steps in the process. And then we, and possibly, I know there was some language previously about a vote and different things, that may be changed or not changed as we look at that. But the 3 mile plan, as I look at it, is just looking at where potential, I mean, we can't obviously develop in the national forest, you know, I mean, where there's possible things, but that does not mean that we've got like some land grab idea in place where we're going to come in and say, we want to annex all of, you know, all the way up to Ridge Road, or we want to go out here and get the Sundance or anything like that. And I just want to double check that this is the way that the town sees that as well.
Yes, that is correct. Yeah, and I think you summarized it, so as Attorney Madsen, that this is really just a tool used within the annexation process. And it creates that limitation, so you can't go further than the 3 mile boundary, and all of a sudden double the size of your jurisdiction under annexation. I mean, it creates those boundaries.
Can I also add just one thing, just to clarify? So say you do create a 3 mile plan in advance of getting an annexation petition. And within your 3 mile plan, there's an area that you see as having potential for being annexed into the town, and you say, here's where the streets would be, here's where water, how we would do the water and provide all of the services. These are the land uses that we're thinking. So you put that plan, you adopt the plan, you've got the 3 mile plan, and then that landowner comes to the town and says, we want to annex, we like this, we think it's a good idea. The Board of Trustees, the Planning Commission has an opportunity to review that petition, and then the Board of Trustees and make a recommendation, and the Board of Trustees has the ultimate authority to say yes or no. But just because it's in the 3 mile plan in an area that the town has said we think this could be good, isn't binding in any way on the municipality.
Or the property owners.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then it goes back to the ordinance for the whole process.
And yes, and ultimately to state law, the Annexation Act.
Right.
But yeah, I think there's like this general fear in the community of like, oh, we're gonna get like scooped up like eminent domain, and then, I mean, that's impossible to happen, so.
Well, it's not impossible if, Susan?
Yeah, I'm sorry, but so I got very involved in IGA negotiations because I was really distressed actually that I felt the town didn't value the land we're on, which is in a wildlife corridor, the Magnolia. So Sundance Cafe, then my neighbor to the county, then we have 3 mining claims that were ripped out of the national forest, and we're surrounded by national forest. And I felt, when I looked at it, I thought, wait a minute, you're directing all the development into the wildlife corridor on the southern border. Well, then I found out that not a single neighborhood wanted to be annexed into the town, you know, who was there with the, you know, the caribou people in particular. I know the county told me at one of these meetings, one of the case, and, you know, the county thought that was a good area because you have access to water. You know, when they were having the discussions, which were all done without public discussion here at all. And I think this is an issue that we need to confront, and that is getting the public involved. And I have to say, it's one of these comparisons I want to share with people. Mayor Larson chaired the subcommittee on the municipal government, and he removed all the language that had to do with the public being involved. And then he said, you can't adjust it. So that's one of the things I wanted to put before the board of trustees, look at the language, and this is what it means to me for an authoritarian style government. And we don't really want to hear you could cause problems. But anyway, I just wanted to say that I don't know if anyone thinks they're going to be forced into the town. I never heard that. That's the thing. I remember Jonathan Baumhofer saying, when I made some comments that I was concerned about it because my property was included, it wasn't because I thought I was going to be forced into it. No one thinks that. It's that I felt that you're specifying that area, and our properties in the Magnolia Environmental Conservation Area, and the county's instructions to their planners in that area are you discourage development. And then we have the town saying, no, we want to develop there. And so I think that's a red herring that people think they're going to be forced into it. What we're concerned about is overdevelopment. So for example, and making it so, the only people in the end, there were a couple simple annexations, which I agree should be made easier. You know, like J.D. Morrison on her property is partly in the town and partly outside. But otherwise, you have this very large development plan in wildlife corridor on the southern border, right? 70 units. On the northern border, you probably know there's 4 properties in a row that are owned by the Walton family that bought, so that, and they asked to be included in the NG. The IGA, for those of you who don't know, what the county, what we were doing was specifying areas that the county pre-approved for annexation. That's what it was about. Not that anyone was going to be forced, but the county would not, they'd agree that you can annex these things. And so, but on the northern side, so that 23.7 acre parcel that's on Ridge Road right next to the dump is north, it's right on the border, they wanted to be included as annexed. Well, that's owned, that's a separate deed, $7 million they paid for 4 pieces of property. So I look at that and I think, wow, you're making annexation so easy with this ordinance. Obviously, there are people who want to invest money in real estate. And my concern is that the town's not exercising reasonable, sustainable development, urban planning, which all calls for planning inside the city. And Polis just came out with something about,
But again, that illustrates why this plan is, I feel the plan is important.
Yes.
And it's not, we're grabbing people to pull into town. I just want to make that clear.
No, and I don't think anyone ever feared that. And I have to say, yes, the 3-mile plan is good, especially if you really do look at how are we going to provide these services. Because that's the other thing people are concerned about inside the town, that the infrastructure, the problems we have. Right?
And that goes into it.
Yeah, so no, so I agree. It would be a good time.
We're not here to decide tonight.
No, I know.
What the 3-mile plan, we just want to talk about the concept.
And I think it's a good idea. I just wanted to clarify, no one's afraid they're going to be burdened, and that's not, it's a problem to sprawl on the outside, because it's all of a sudden, we don't think real estate investors are salivating over this land that was under county restriction. Now the town, they don't say, hey, free,
Right.
We don't even want the planning commission to have a say. That's how I read that line.
We'll have a say.
Yes.
Okay, so to wrap this up, Miranda, so you said you wanted to check a little bit more into options for grants or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think also the Board of Trustees has not talked about the 3-mile plan. So this is a great conversation, but I would assume with Mayor Billy still on here, that maybe we can see further discussion as we come to the annexation town hall. And I think more to come from their level.
Right. And again, it's not a burning deadline.
But there is a deadline, though. It's on.
There is a deadline.
It's before the super ITA expires.
As Attorney Matson noted, there are some municipalities who choose to do their 3-mile plan once an annexation petition is submitted.
Oh.
I mean, they're not that we want to be those people necessarily, but there are options before us, and I think that we just want to make sure we're thoughtful of this.
But if we don't have a 3-mile plan after October 12th or whatever, the super IGA expires, then nothing really happens. We're just in this no man's land of, we can't look at an annexation proposal because we don't have a 3-mile plan. But there's nothing that can swoop in and happen just because we don't have a 3-mile plan on October 12th.
No, the fact that if the town doesn't have a 3-mile plan in place and somebody submits an annexation petition, it still needs to be processed. So
But we're governed by state law that says
you have to have it.
Right, but so really it would be a mad rush to get a bunch of stuff done in that period of time.
So you're making better decisions if you have it in place.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you think about this ahead of time and get the infrastructure, check on the infrastructure and what the town's capabilities are and so forth ahead of time, it makes a whole lot more sense.
I'm just saying, yeah, I agree. I'm just saying there's no nothing really happens on October 13th that really changes anything.
Those are technical or legal risks. Right.
Well, even until we have a 3-mile my plan, whether that's before or after October 12th, we can't look at or process an annexation.
No, so we can't, right? But,
Yes, after October,
and we would just do it on a need by need basis.
right, when they're
My
submitted.
plan is just to facilitate faster those annexations in the future because we've already assessed and
It's
come up with the idea of like.
And or, yes, it would be that way, or, but Susan just elaborated all these things, but what if you said, hey, we've analyzed and we looked at this and this area is not viable, this area is not viable, this area is not viable, and then they come and turn in an application a month later saying, we'd like to annex, and you said, well, we just went through a 6 month process saying that this is not a viable area. So it's give and take, and it's pros and cons, but it's very important to do it proactively.
And the public engagement is a lot of benefit if it's in advance.
Exactly.
That's how you get the screaming and shouting.
Well,
Out of here.
and I think also the public voices do need to be heard on this. And we're not just one committee that is voicing our opinion, we're getting other input, which is important.
So I think what we can do is take the recommendations here from the planning commission and share them with the board of trustees, because like I said, they have not talked about this. So I think it's important that they evaluate what kind of time frame they're looking at when it comes to the 3 mile.
Okay, I think that's a good next step. Thank you. Okay, any other comments? I think
I do have one, and it's just that there seems to be, even within this room, confusion about, what concerns are from the public or the level of how much information out there. I will tell you, Susan, that I've talked to some people that do have those fears, that you said that you don't think people are. There are some people out there that have fears that the town is going to come and scoop them up, once the IGA is gone. Maybe, I don't know how this would be accomplished, but as we get farther into this, I assume we'll have some kind of public meeting, but I wonder if there couldn't be some kind of a fact sheet or something that goes out, on the town website and maybe in the paper that says, hey, here's the top 20 things you need to know about annexation, something like that.
So Nicole, trustee Sterling is actually working on that, and FAQ as well as a timeline for the annexation process of kind of where we were and where we are now. And then the intention is for the board of trustees to hold what we're calling a town hall, but a public meeting where there can be an open dialogue about the annexation. And it seems like tentatively aiming for March for that to occur. And then trustee Sterling will try to have the FAQs done much sooner than that. She's actively working on them now.
But that still makes this discussion time. Okay, thank you. Thank you everyone for your input. Let's wrap up with the town staff report.
I'm going to put her on the spot, but I'd love to give Britt an opportunity to introduce herself. She is our new community planner. She will be your staff liaison when she's fully trained. You can't go to me yet, but Britt just started. She was with our utilities department and has moved over as our community planner, and she's on, I think I've decided, day 10. Britt,
I mean, she pretty much said everything I would have said. I was with the utilities department as of July. So I do have a little bit of background in some of that, which I think will come into play and help me to understand some of the sewage and, water issues and things. But I am still learning and looking for you guys' support and knowledge, as well as Miranda's still training me. So, but I'm here to help. So we'll see how it goes.
This month I just did kind of a ton of accolades we did at the end of the year. We don't get have a lot of accolades. We do 2 thumbs up, which is an opportunity to celebrate staff members, and I thought what a great opportunity is for some copying and pasting.
Guys, appreciate it.
Thank you. I put into the staff report, so you'll see those. We all look at the meeting center and the utilities department. Mentioned Britt. Sustainability coordinator, unfortunately, Erica Thorley did submit her resignation as our sustainability coordinator. She went on to Erie and has a job with their sustainability department. So we are actively recruiting. SAB plans to appoint someone into that role tomorrow, and we'll finish their interviews tomorrow. Still working on roadmap to recovery, which is the peak-to-peak work being done with Estes Park all the way down to Grant County. And we're working on broadband. Really, Nederland and Gilpin County are kind of the missing link when it comes to broadband. And so we'd love to work with Estes and kind of piece together that middle mile so that we do have broadband along the entire peak-to-peak. Heavy undertaking, and Gilpin's taking the lead, but we hope to be successful. I serve on the opioid council where we did our first recommendation for how to spend opioid funds, and so I outlined what our recommendations were. Nederland Police Department, I'm sure you've heard, we had offered the job to Daniel Glenhill from North Carolina. He was intending to start on January 17th. Unfortunately, he notified me the week prior that he would be unable to accept the job and come to Nederland. So he wrote a little letter indicating why, that he had to turn down the job. And we're currently considering kind of what our next steps are. The town will hold a town hall open meeting next Tuesday, the 31st at 6 o'clock to discuss the police department and kind of what we believe to be our next steps. To that here, I sent out a flyer, should have got it.
It's online too, right?
And it'll be online as well, right? Okay. Always include a public works update. They've been busy. That major snowstorm, of course, that took a toll on our teams. We're still small teams, we're still teams of 4, but they always do a great job. We did recently kind of push out some FAQs to help people understand how we approach snow plowing, both street plowing and sidewalks. So take a look at that if you haven't seen it online. We acquired rink and tennis effective the rink facility on January 1st, and the Parks Department has done an incredible job. But it's now a town-run asset, where formerly it was run by nonprofits. So it is now part of the Parks Department.
The ownership of the land changed?
No, it was always our land. We just didn't run the operation. So now we run the operation.
It's a volunteer effort.
A couple things learning here today. I found out we were awarded grant funding for a co-responder. So, even with what's happening with the police department, we will have our own embedded mental health support specialist here in Nederland to support our individuals. Right now, they get assistance kind of on an as-needed, sporadic basis. So the grant is actually for 18 months to have a dedicated co-responder. Working on the budget book, finishing that up, and just staying busy trying to wrap up 2022 and go into 2023.
Yeah. All right, any other business or anything somebody wants to bring up, or besides going to bed?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Anyone opposed? Can I do it that way?
Yeah. Oh,
Great. Meeting adjourned at
Thank you, everyone.
10:27.
Good.